OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
7:30 on this Tuesday morning. You're very welcome along to OTB AM. A football-packed show for you this morning. We've got Premier League footballer Conor Hourihane joining us later on. We've got League of Ireland footballer Gary Rogers talking to us about the impasse in the return of League of Ireland coming later on. But most importantly, we've got OTB's foremost football man, Nathan Murphy, with us for the morning. How are you, Nathan?
Good morning.
So Conor Hourihane is with us later on today. He's going to be in this very unusual situation in less than 36 hours where he is going to be playing football in a deserted, empty stadium, but also knowing that there are millions and millions and millions of people more interested than ever looking on from around the world.
Aston Villa, Sheffield United. This is what it's all about. I see Sky are going with a 2-hour build-up. Just 2 hours to get us ready for this. Why not? Why not? It's what we want. 6 o'clock tomorrow evening. It's going to be quite a festival of football building up to Arsenal, Manchester City. Yeah, it's going to be a slightly surreal experience, I guess, being the first ones out there. And I do have a bit of sympathy with footballers because we know that everybody's just waiting for the first scandal. What is acceptable in this COVID-19 age? What sort of cheating is really going to bring down the wrath of British society upon you? Like diving. Is diving now? Think of all that's gone on and you're still diving. This is the sort of cheating you're at. Do we hammer them even more?
We hammer them less. We hammer them absolutely less. You can get away with whatever you want now at this point because there are people out there who have been discussing things like flouting lockdown restrictions, standing too close to people in the queues for the ice cream man. People have been doing horrible things like that over the last couple of weeks. So you can do whatever you want on a football field, quite frankly. Yeah,
I'd be interested to see the corner kicks. Can you step away from somebody legitimately and say they're just invading your space? It's just totally unacceptable. Yeah, it's going to be a weird watch. Sky, it seems. Are you going to go with the filtered noise or the unfiltered noise?
I don't know yet. I'm a huge fan of the filtered noise at the moment, the crowd noise. I think it makes a big difference. But I kind of want to hear if I can pick up on anything the players are saying, to be honest.
Yeah. I just want to be nosy more than anything else.
Yeah, I'll probably go with crowd noise for Sheffield United against Aston Villa because I care less about that game. But for Arsenal against Manchester City, I don't think you need crowd noise for you to be tuned in. I don't think I'm going to be dual screening too much. I think I'll be much more interested. I will be for the first 25 minutes or thereabouts of Aston Villa against Sheffield United, but you kind of want a bit of atmosphere to sort of create this as a bit of an occasion.
I presume when you talk about Arsenal Manchester City, you talk about listening on the radio and our live commentary.
Sorry, of course. Well,
tomorrow night.
There's no red button on the radio, Nathan. What has been
there
OTB's
is no red
decision?
button. If you're tuned in, you're tuned in.
And what's
we'll have no crowd noises.
No crowd noises. Okay, very good.
Just Murphy and Kerr, the way nature intended.
That's going to be better than like it ever was before lockdown. Brian Kerr without the stupid disruption of a football match or crowd noise behind him.
Brian, just let it go.
This is the sort of thing we need. And how long and arduous a decision was this to go dry and go a cappella with OTB's commentary tomorrow night?
Well, there was a short discussion with our producer JP and with Joe Malloy to get their sense. And I don't know, radio, it feels is different to television because radio commentary, naturally, you're talking a lot more than you would on television commentary. In fact, there's pretty much always somebody talking. So there's no fear of long silences. And I don't know, on radio, I think people want the natural experience. It's a different scenario that you're tuned in. Probably most people listening in are driving along somewhere and I think you can create a bit more of an atmosphere amongst the commentary team. So when there are chances, your voice naturally lifts anyways. Whereas that's the one thing that the television coverage has struggled with is, well, if the commentator isn't talking, how do you know something is about to happen?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
I can't be expected to sit and watch this thing.
And that's the thing that I found with the crowd noises as well. So have you been thinking, when it comes to the art of commentary, have you been sitting down with a pen and paper thinking how you're going to change your game tomorrow night?
Well, you need to make sure you just don't fall into old habits and go, and the crowd goes wild.
I think that was
first goal in. Ow.
I think that was only that Carlsberg ad really that was on the radio where you said that.
Was it?
Do you remember when you went through the list of results and it was Cabinteely 5, Real Madrid 1? Bit of a surprise, that one. A Nathan Murphy classic, my favourite ad that's ever been on radio. But make sure it's tomorrow night, 8 o'clock kick-off. It's out live and off the ball.
8:15 actually on.
8:15,
Listen, you get
sorry,
the facts right, thanks.
Well, that's tomorrow morning show work to be done there. So 8:15 tomorrow night. Thanks for that. It's going to be Nathan and Brian Kerr. As I say, Conor Hourihane is going to be amongst our guests this morning. We've got Will O'Callaghan coming up at around 8:10 this morning with all the sports news. Gary Rogers, as I say, PFAI chairman and Dundalk goalkeeper, with us at 8:15. The sports page is coming your way at 9:25, and then come 9, Hourihane will be on the line. Tom Malone will be chatting about Royal Ascot then at 9:20. Another big week of behind closed doors racing, and our best case, worst case scenarios for Premier League clubs wraps up today with West Ham and Wolves. First though, before all of that, let's hear from Stuart Barnes. He was chatting to Joe on last night's Off the Ball.
When I told you we'd be a few minutes late getting to you, you told me that's fine by you, a few extra minutes of Bob Dylan. And I was reading your book as well, Sketches from Memory, and there's plenty of Dylan references across this book as well. So we've got an Uber fan, do we?
No, a real Dylan bore, yeah.
What is it about Dylan?
I'm a lyrics man first and foremost, and I think he's the best songwriter there has been in in the history of rock and roll, folk, you name it. And Dylan's ability to reinvent himself. I love the fact that he's been a folk singer, he's been the bête noire of the establishment, mid-60s, his country and western. I just played an album of his Triplicate where he was crooning and doing his Dylan version of Frank Sinatra. He's been everywhere and done everything, and he's not afraid to try something new. And I think that's a pretty decent way to approach life.
I got the impression from your book where you would throw in references as well as to Bob Dylan, but to everybody from Colm Tóibín to Emily Dickinson, that you enjoy your books, you enjoy reading. Talk to us about that, because that's not something you get to talk about across an 80-minute match on Sky Sports. So books, a big part of your life?
Yeah, massive. It's a massive part of my professional life. I'm a massive reader of books, a huge amount of fiction, but all sorts, fact as well. And I always think that it's very easy. You could spend your whole life watching rugby matches, talking to rugby coaches, and as you get older, talking to players as well, so you don't get too detached. But there's only that's one angle of approaching sport and life, and I think there's a more interesting way, which is to go via books. And I could be scurrying through the New York Review of Books, and I might just find a quote there, and it sounds pretentious, but I'll just underline it because it's there's so much that's relevant. Rugby isn't in a box, and my beef with sport, often with its journalism and broadcasting, is that you categorise that way, and people sort of see writers and broadcasters as someone really who's stuck in a little box talking about rugby, or in a press box writing about it. And I think that it's a great big wide world out there, and there are experiences to be drawn from it in terms of literature, because I've travelled the world a million times reading books, but I've been to Australia and New Zealand a lot with rugby, but nothing like reading.
You unpacked that box yesterday in your Sunday Times column. Rugby is due its day of reckoning over both race and class, and you start off by saying white silence is violence. You'll have seen the slogan on placards in Bristol and beyond, and you say, if this is the case, then rugby union has a more violent history off the field than most. And you talk about the three most famous brands. They featured in the most abhorrent of all racist forms of apartheid: the Springboks, the British and Irish Lions, and the All Blacks. And you list out the many tours which have taken place there, post the Glen Eagles agreement included.
Yep.
English tours. You don't mention the Irish tour of 1981, but that very much...
Well, because I was talking Empire, I thought about this, Joe, and I thought, if I put Ireland in with Empire, I'm going to end up with a few people in your country giving me stick. So I left Ireland and France. I left Ireland and France out of it for that reason.
Right, interesting. Because I know even of the 1981 tour, John Robbie, who's made his life down in South Africa now,
yes, yeah.
he recently described the 81 tour as a stain that will never leave me. Really weighs heavily on him. So, I mean, it's a fantastic piece. And you do say history cannot be rewritten, but maybe a new and better page can be turned. And you floated the idea of, for instance, Amaro Itoje being Lions captain and the symbolism that would have on the next Lions tour. It's a pretty shameful history, really, isn't it? Those rugby tours to South Africa, they don't sit easily with you, clearly, based on this piece.
No, they don't.
I know
They don't.
you turned down a tour in your playing days.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great thing when ANC won the election, because I always wanted to see the country, because it had such a history as a rugby nation, but the rugby nation came very much second. So I was very lucky to tour in 1984 when apartheid had come to an end. But it's always fascinated me. I've got a few links with Donald Woods, the activist, and I know his son Dylan very well, and do some work there. So it's quite close to, well, I nearly said my heart. Some people think I don't have one, but if I have a heart, South Africa would be somewhere there. And I've been there many times since. It's a troubled country, and like all these things, it's not just colour, it is class as well, which I try to put into that piece. And the whole thing, it does go back to the fact that rugby is an empire sport. Rugby and cricket, they were born out of empire. England, New Zealand, South Africa, Australia with their Aboriginal policies, and I could have included them in the piece as well. But I just felt they weren't quite on the same level of rugby brand as Lions, All Blacks, Springboks. So I left that off there. But there's no doubt at all. I mean, firstly, I would say also, I would take Maro Itoje, irrespective of colour, white, green, yellow, pink, black, I don't care. He would be my Lions captain, and I've thought that for probably 2 years. But there is, when that is done, there's a very beneficial symbolism involved. And there's a degree of atonement that comes without doing the wrong thing. Not a politically correct decision. I have been someone, I'm of the left, but I have always been wary of political correctness. It unnerves me. But I think that if Itoje had been slightly behind someone else as a contender, I'd have said take him anyway as the captain. I would have done that way. I think what's happening now, what's been happening in the last few years, what's not said means that perhaps this is an instance where you would have said you take a black man as captain anyway. I think the great thing is, from a Lions perspective, I reckon he's the best captain. He's an extremely articulate man. And I think a shot of him and Siya Kolisi shaking hands before and at the end of the series would be more important than the Lions winning, drawing, or South Africa winning or drawing or losing.
You did touch on class in your piece as well. Give us a sense of rugby and class in the UK today.
Well, I think England in particular. Ireland as well. I mean, there's no doubt at all. Dublin it's not a working class game in Dublin. Never been my sense of it. It's come out of Blackrock and such schools, and I've always, because of my politics, I've always had a sort of a hankering to be on the Munster side of the border, because the sort of traditions, and maybe it's a myth now, I don't know, but I've always felt that Munster, when I was a kid, I was told that old phrase, Dockers and the Dockers and the doctors. So I took the Dockers side there, and it's even in Wales, even in Wales as a schoolboy there, if there was someone from Millfield came for a Welsh trial, he could be just shot into the team, and he wasn't great. And there's a perception in Wales. Wales is very much it's a working class country, and it's working class sport. To a greater degree, I think, than definitely England, probably Ireland, and definitely Scotland. Wales is more working class, but there's still deference to the public school elite. And again, I think it goes back to empire. And that's why the piece I wrote in yesterday's Sunday Times, yes, it was about colour, but colour has to mix with class, and that's why I talked about Ellis Genge. And so many, England have had a lot of black internationals, but so many of them are Millfield or Harrow. When I was captain of Bath, we signed Stephen Gomo, Victor Bugu, Adebayo. The three of them came from two public schools in Devon, like a job lot. And I always sensed that when you were black man from a public school coming, there was almost a sense of you'd be accepted straight away because that was sort of part and parcel. And Genge, I think, has been a very feisty character, a very interesting character, because he comes from a tough part of Bristol where, you know, he's working class in extremis, capital W, and he feels that. He feels the working class more than he feels the race thing. And I think that is why they're inextricably linked.
Was Oxford an uncomfortable fit for you in ways?
Yeah, it was. It was. I mean, I was a kid and I couldn't wait to get away from home. I liked to pint even at the age of 18. And that was all very exciting. But, you know, when I went up for interviews, there were people who I thought were professors, tweed suits, sitting there. And I'm thinking, why are they sitting in the interview room? And they weren't. They were public school people from Harrow, Wellington, wherever. And they were being groomed for it. And they were from a different class, a different world to me. And I can recall during the Falklands War, getting into trouble because we had an awful lot of Oxford people. I'd done a bit of time in the military. Again, it goes back to this class thing. I remember when the Belgrano was sung at number 8, my college team raised a glass and saying, "Here's to the Belgrano going down." And I sort of raised a glass and talked about our ship that had gone down a couple of weeks earlier. And there was a stony silence. And I you know, to me in that war, it was a tragedy to see British troops dying, equal tragedy to see Argentinians dying. That's how I felt. And Oxford, see, we keep coming back. Oxford, again, it's part of this whole class empire thing. It was a wonderful place in many ways, and I messed up quite badly. My tutors were magnificent. I'm far more interested in academia in the years when I left there. But I found it overwhelming. I found it class-ridden. And I think if I hadn't been a very good rugby player who walked straight in as a key component in the Oxford team, then I'd have found it very hard. And I can recall, I think it might be in the book sketches from memory, I recall being with the rugby boys, and we'd go down from the junior common room to the place where the state school lads were playing Space Invaders, which was the new thing then. And I'd be with the rugby players, the sort of public school boys, mocking them for their accent. And I still had this goddamn sort of half Welsh accent as well. But I was ashamed of it, and you knew it, but you were scared what to do. A little bit of that bullying there. And like I say, had I been out of it for 3 years, I'd have gone there. I'd have told public school sector where the hell to go. It only happened sort of when there was a war. Was I just couldn't stand this sort of nationalism. I never liked nationalism, and I still don't.
Mm-hmm. And for people who don't know, because I hadn't realised this, so you were an Essex-born Welsh schoolboy prodigy.
Yeah.
Bassaleg was the school, and I know you played for the Welsh under-15s, and I think you even jumped up several grades to the 19s in the space of a year. You did say in sketches from memory, "Too many people told me how good I was. I didn't like to fight in the dirt for it. It was the divine right of Barnes." A touch entitled, how you described yourself. So you were very, very talented teenager coming through.
Yeah, I was very hard working as well, which people find quite surprising. But yeah, I worked my arse off, and I was a good sportsman, cricket, football, and I made the decision to go rugby, and you know, I played 4 straight years without missing a game for Welsh schools, and you know, people like Carwyn James, the legend, would write pieces for the Western Mail, and you know, he'd say Barnes is the future, and you just got so excited. And you know, because Wales is a small rugby country, you'd be in there as a schoolboy all the time, and things came easy, you know. And it would have helped had I been dropped as a 16-year-old from the under-19 thing. Would have helped, but I never was, and you never thought you would. And you just thought everything would happen. And you know, I played my first game for Newport as soon as I could, sort of 18 in a couple of days, and scored a try within a minute. Everything seemed to just go right, you know, too much. You need things to go wrong. I understand that now. And I went to Oxford. Whilst that delayed sort of seriousness of the career, you walked straight into an Oxford University rugby team. It's very different to now. Lots of international. And you were a key component, and just nothing went wrong. And I got capped pretty quickly, though I thought I should have been capped as a 12-year-old probably. And then when I got dropped for Rob Andrew, I couldn't. And instead of thinking, well, how can I make myself undroppable? I sort of watched him play and went, Christ, that was rubbish. He didn't do that very well. And there was a little part of that, I think, went through the international career as well. And you'd say two things there. Because I was entitled as a sportsman as a kid, therefore you couldn't bear losing. That was a problem. And the other problem was English rugby was played a very different way in the early 80s to Welsh. And whilst I was English, I played like a Welshman, and I don't think English selectors understood what I wanted to do. And I sure as hell couldn't see the interest in turning up in a training session, and as a fly half, you were practicing kicking the ball dead from 60 metres, because in those days it would be a dropout 25. And you're thinking, if that's all you're doing. I was entitled when I shouldn't have been, but that's quite hard not to be, I think. And I was English in terms of my blood when I was Celtic in terms of my outlook on life.
You made your England debut in '84. You won 10 caps over the following decade, I suppose. It would always be billed as Rob Andrews kicking, more structured, that he could run a game better. Is that how you see things, or do you bristle at that characterization?
No. Funnily enough, the thing I bristle at is when I'm called the Cavalier and Rob's the Roundhead. I mean, I couldn't be a Cavalier because I'd have been fighting on the side of the Roundheads, and I suspect Rob, probably from Barnard Castle in Yorkshire, would have been on the side of the other lot. So straight away, that's wrong. And I also bristle. I wasn't running fly half, but to be a running fly half in England was just to be a maverick. And I hate that word, because a maverick is someone who doesn't assess risk, who can't run a game, who just does things on the blink. It's completely different. I was very well tutored. I was coached well by Welshmen at school level. I was very lucky to find my way to Brian Ashton very quickly, and Jack Grealish. And I thought things for myself, but if I was anything, I was a decision maker. And if you looked at players now, I would want to be associated with someone from an Irish perspective, like Ronan O'Gara or Johnny Sexton, because they controlled games. Now, I would say Rob was a better kicker out of hand than I was. There's no doubt about it at all. But it's not just how you kick the ball, it's where you kick it and why you kick it. And my view was that I had an ability to see things on the hoof, to be able to change the shape of. And now I'm just the running fly half, and Rob, who could also run the ball. He wasn't a kicker. He's just the kicker. I'm the runner. I don't like the Venetian black and white to it.
Yes, or simplification. So across that 10 years, are you a frustrated onlooker too often to Rob Andrew?
Well, it's my fault. Yeah, I was very frustrated to the extent that twice I told England where to stop it. And that doesn't help with an international career when you're about 23 and you retire from international rugby. But Bath at that stage were they played more exciting, better rugby than England, more interesting rugby. So I thought, when you're an amateur and you're on the bench and you're going up there for weekends doing training sessions, and then you see a game, it's absolutely dreadful. That when you get back with Bath, you'll be playing a more sophisticated brand of rugby after. I just thought, sod it. Why do I want to do this? And I quit. And I shouldn't have quit. I think there's that element of I should have rolled up my sleeves and proved myself. I didn't. I'm better than him. And that was a mistake. And I did that twice. But it was a mistake. But it was also the right thing to do. Because it's only with hindsight I could say I shouldn't have done it. I was boiling up. I needed to release the steam. And I also, as an amateur rugby player, I had the God-given right just to say, I don't give a shit about playing for England. I said 10 minutes ago, I wasn't a nationalist, so Twickenham to me wasn't everything. Running out of the Rec in front of 10,000 meant more to me than running out in front of 60,000 at Twickenham, because I believed more in community. But to round this little segment up, did I make a balls of my international career? Absolutely. And in the end, you know, it was the thought of a Lions tour that brought me back, made me play B rugby, and I had that sort of day against Scotland where it had all boiled down to you're either Andrew or Barnes. It was silly. And the day went my way. The next day in Ireland, I was man of the match again, but for Ireland, I played so bloody poorly. But it had all got very, very silly by that stage. But no, I didn't really help my cause at all. I can look back and say, yeah, perhaps I was a little bit hard done by, but probably the person who did the most damage to my international career was me.
And who were the people that you would have turned to for advice in that period? Is it family? Is it parents? Is it mates? Is it coaches?
No, it was very hard. I kept things bottled up. When I spoke to my wife, I'd be ranting. Sometimes there would be, even in the Bath team, not much. I mean, I was very lucky in that I was having not liked Jerry Guscott and Jerry Guscott not liking me when I joined. We became quite good friends. And it wouldn't be turning for advice, but I'd say we were in a training session at Bath and I was completely comfortable in Bath. It was like my domain. So you just do everything. In a training session, I'd drop a goal 30 metres through the mud off my left foot, swagger around. Guscott would turn to me and say, "Pity you haven't got the balls to do that in the white shirt of England. You haven't got the nuts to do it." And I'd go home and I'd say to my wife, "You can't believe what Guscott has just said to me." You know, and that, and there was a little tale as well in the last minute of a cup final, 60,000 at Twickenham, and Bath had always won every final. We were drawing with Harlequins, and we didn't like Harlequins, and a draw would have meant a tied tournament, and to us that was defeat. And I think there was 99 minutes on the clock at the last minute. I was absolutely shagged out. It's a hot day, not much oxygen left in the tank, and we had a line out, and we hadn't won one all day. And I said to Richard Hill, "Just call it quick off the top from now, get it into my hands." And I just turned to Phil de Glanville and Jerry Guscott and said, "I'm going to bang this into the air, try and land it on the 22. If we win the ball, we get quick breakdown and we'll see if we can just split their defence that way." Guscott had his hands on his knees. He was standing outside centre. He shouted, "If you haven't got the effing balls to go for a drop goal, chuck and miss one to me, Barnes." So I said, "F you." And this was the degree of bar sophistication. I said, "F you, Jerry." The ball came to me. I took a long breath. I had time. Peter Winterbottom had run me into the ground, but he was knackered as well. And from just under 40 metres, I hit this low scudder, and it just went straight through the post. It wasn't pretty, but it was clean enough. It was no Sexton in Paris. And again, that was Guscott goading. And that's, I think, a player always needs that. Someone to just say, "Go on, can you do that?" But in England environment, you felt that was a challenge or a threat if it wasn't a mate. In Bath, it was how you lived your life. And I would hazard, well, I know it's how Saracens have operated, and I'd hazard a guess that Leinster possibly as well are driven by that sort of challenge.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
OTB's Mount Rushmore. 32 counties, one county representative choosing their sporting Mount Rushmore.
I'm going to be very unpopular. Thank God we can't go too far. I might have to go back into lockdown.
The bad news is they're all from Waterford.
Join the debate across all our social channels at Off the Ball.
You just need to put a health warning with it.
And catch the live decision making over the next few months on OTB AM, live every weekday at 7:30 AM on OTB Sports Radio.
cartilage and bone health are important for keeping the spring in your step. Joint Ace from the nutritional experts at Vitabiotics is uniquely formulated with glucosamine, vitamin C and D and copper to help maintain healthy bones, cartilage and connective tissues. Ideal for maintaining an active lifestyle. Keep a spring in your step with Joint Ace in your local pharmacy, in store and online.
OTB AM.
You're welcome back. That full piece with Stuart Barnes is available now on the OTB Sports app, where you can subscribe to all of our podcasts. It is 8 o'clock. And Nathan, we need to get into a couple of topics. The only topic really that's mattered on the show over the last little while. So a bit of controversy surrounding our Mount Rushmore slot. Surprise, surprise. Last Friday is where the controversy reached a whole new level when we did the Waterford Mount Rushmore. And not a single hurler made it up into the mountain. 4 names and not a single hurler was selected by Oisin Langan and Jesse Barr on that particular occasion. Yesterday then, the controversy reached a whole new level. Their neighbours over in Kilkenny, courtesy of Enda McAvoy and Gary Halpin, decided that neither Brian Cody nor Henry Shefflin deserved a place on Mount Rushmore, as is their want, in fairness, when it comes to the selectors. But the reaction has been interesting, to say the least. Let's go through a few of the comments before we get your take on all of this. Shawnee Flanagan has been in touch to ask, is it limited to one representative per sport or something? DJ was great, but I've had Shefflin or Cody in instead of him. And I certainly would have had the rugby fella in there if you'd include an extra hurler in a county known for being hurling mad. Kevin McNamara says, absolutely disgraceful Brian Cody isn't on it. You mentioned Kilkenny, and if Brian Cody isn't in your first 4 people that come to mind, ridiculous. Queeving Glynn says, when being an All-Ireland winning captain is one of his lesser achievements, a man like that should be pushing for an All-Ireland Mount Rushmore, never mind Kilkenny. Zippy says, I love hurling, but it's only a big deal in a handful of counties. Achieving on the international stage like Mullins does and Willie Duggan does is worthy of extra points when it comes to totalling up the merits of each. So Zippy's been in touch to actually defend the decision yesterday, so it's not all against the lack of hurling names up on the mountain. Daniel Brown says, I fixed it. 1 King Henry, 2 Brian Cody, 3 DJ, 4 Willie Mullins. Albie says, great stuff, boys. Great to see Enda off the ball. He should be on more. Really enjoyed both arguments. Mine would have been Cody, DJ, Angela and Duggan. I had Duxie in, but I have to change it for the great Willie Duggan, a hero and an animal, and above all else, a gentleman. Well done, Enda and Gary. Conor McKenna says, greatest hurling team of all time from 2006 to 2015. 8 All-Irelands rather in 10 seasons. Nobody associated with the team selected. Any particular reason for this? At Enda McAvoy, which is obviously a brave move when you're giving out and actually tagging the journalist in question. Enda gets back saying, my forward Downey, Shefflin, Carey and Duggan. Gary Halpin, who was allowed to make one change, replaced Shefflin with Willie Mullins. The baton passed very effectively there. And then he says that's a very fair explanation and a very nice exchange on Twitter. So a lot of reasonable arguments in there, Nathan. How, on a scale of 1 to 10, how big of a disgrace has this been, the last 2 Mount Rushmores, in your opinion?
Oh, well, I thought Waterford was an 8. Yesterday I thought was verging, heading towards a 10. But it's easy to rant and rave until you have to take somebody out. And Willie Duggan clearly comes from that sort of forgotten generation almost of Irish rugby players. And the more I read about him over the last couple of days, the more you realise just how brilliant he was. That of this modern generation, he would still be in the conversation for Ireland's greatest ever number 8. So therefore he has to be in the mix. But, if you are picking an Mount Rushmore for Ireland, for the 32 counties, Brian Cody would be in the mix. We're talking about the greatest team this country has ever produced, arguably in any code. Hurling is our national sport, and Brian Cody is the man who made it all possible. Would there be a JJ, a Tommy Walsh, a Henry Shefflin if it wasn't for the genius of Brian Cody? And maybe the last few days have spoken of some innate, which is surprising, lack of self-confidence amongst hurling people, that they don't back themselves against other more international sports. I never would have thought it was possible. I would have thought that most hurling people and hurling counties would have taken advantage of this situation to have 2-3 hurlers up on their Mount Rushmore. And the case is always made of international success. But whatever about Waterford, and you can make the case that they haven't won All Irelands, I still think that a Mount Rushmore is more than just trophies and medals. I think it has to be, because otherwise DJ Carey doesn't get in. Henry Shefflin gets in because Henry Shefflin has more All-Ireland titles than everybody else. But there was a magic to DJ, which I think both Tommy Walsh and Enda spoke of yesterday, that he was known throughout the country. It wasn't just amongst hurling people. There was something extra about DJ. You could easily have had 3 hurlers. I assumed when we started looking at this list, it would be 3 hurlers, that it would be DJ, Henry and Cody. I remember Cody did it as a player as well. He captained Kilkenny to an All-Ireland as a player. I think of all the names that have missed out so far in all of the counties, the most shocking is that Brian Cody has not made it onto Kilkenny's Mount Rushmore.
A man of the match in 2008. 30 years between captaining an All-Ireland and winning man of the match in an All-Ireland. Incredible stuff. What is your view on this whole idea of trying to spread the picks around through different sports?
I don't agree with that either. I think your Mount Rushmore, for me, the basis is you look at Mount Rushmore and everybody in your county recognises the 4 figures instantly. Instantly. That because in certain counties, certain sports are bigger. And there's no question that international success at times is more difficult than local success. But if that is the barometer, I think any international soccer player should be on their county's Mount Rushmore. No matter what. No matter how many caps they got. Because to make it as a footballer, any player who has played in the Premier League, like, should Seanie Maguire have been on Kilkenny's Mount Rushmore? Republic of Ireland international, playing at a very high level in the Championship. I didn't even hear his name mentioned.
Well, here's the thing. I see what you're saying, and I definitely kind of agree with you largely about that way of thinking. But I wonder if non-GAA people are actually finding it harder to get on the mountain because they are less associated with their county. So, for example, last week, Ken McGrath, Waterford legend, because he wore the white and blue of Waterford consistently throughout his career. Thomas Barr, his greatest moments are in the green of Ireland. Like, I'm not saying that that's like what it comes down to or anything like that, but it's the same with some of the decisions yesterday. Like, Kilkenny is so well known for its hurling, of course because they're amazing at it, but also because you play hurling for your county. You don't represent a different club outside the county in a different country. You don't represent the national team even, unless you're a Gaelic footballer playing international rules. You are so intrinsically linked with your county, and as a result of that, I find that the GAA names are easier to come up with when it comes to linking them with a county. There are many people that we've been like, I didn't even know that person was from that county. So I think that the automatic picks, or certainly the ones that are to the forefront of your mind, are the ones from that county. Now, maybe you will say that that is exactly what should make a Mount Rushmore, the ones that are very closely linked with their county, rather than the best exports from a county. But I don't know. I think that's up to the selector. And as I say, like, it's obviously great to see such good debate and stuff online. But I think that you can make a reasonable case for all the Mount Rushmores that have been made. I just think when you look at it in an overall sense, in fairness, you're like, no Cody, no Shefflin. That is a huge, huge couple of omissions.
It's monumental. For Kilkenny to only have one hurler on their Mount Rushmore. If you think of that heartland on the border of Kilkenny and Waterford, and of the 8 selections, there's one hurler. I'm still shocked and stunned.
Well, in fairness, Wexford, I think, did they go OTT on the GAA? I think they may have. So, like, there has been a little bit of robbing Peter to pay Paul here, like in terms of the hurling community and the GAA community being represented on Mount Rushmore. It has been a bad 5 or 6 days, but it's not the end of the, like, as you say.
No, overall, I think by the time we come to the end of this, it will be the footballers, the soccer players who'll be most hard done by. As you say, because by and large, they end up leaving their county when they're 14, 15. They quite often lose a good bit of their connection because they don't have the opportunities to return home. As you say, they're not there week in, week out in their county jersey. It's been a bit of a surprise. Maybe second to Brian Cody was Aidan O'Brien and Wexford barely getting a mention.
That is extraordinary when you look at the list of achievements and all that sort of thing. Like, in hindsight now, when you look back on Mayo, are you like, good job, well done, I did fantastically well?
Yeah, I was quite fortunate. It's got a lot more complicated since we started out on day one, when I was just given 10 minutes to make my 4 selections, and yourself and Ger Gilroy just seemed to nod along and say, okay, we'll accept that. Whereas now it's an hour-long process involving half the country, and you spend days taking abuse online for your selections, whereas I just went with my 4. I don't think anyone would question Cora Staunton. I think nailed on. The Liam McHale, Kieran MacDonald selections are sort of more of a gut instinct in terms of these were the icons for me of recent times, and I think for an awful lot of Mayo people. But others, again, may point to, well, Lee Keegan was a footballer of the year, Andy Moran was a footballer of the year, but Mayo is a footballing county. I think they need 2-3 footballers up in that Mount Rushmore. And again, I am going on the side of the footballers that I think can be underrepresented, which is why Kilban has gone in there. And I haven't, to be honest, there's been a few, how did Kilban get up there? But not many. And nobody really coming up with too many alternatives.
Well, it's good to see it's not winding you up and it's not still something you think about 2 months down the line anyway, you're Mayo.
Well, I'm constantly concerned I'm going to have to go back and do it all again, and I'll have somebody up against me this time with some huge historical knowledge who'll be making the case for Sean Mannion and telling me I'm a lunatic.
One man who did have a lot of historical knowledge beside him and still managed to screw it up was Will O'Callaghan. Good morning.
Morning, lads. How are things?
What was your Mount Rushmore PTSD like?
Yeah, look, I mean, there was kind of an awkward 24-hour period or so, and a bit like Nathan, I was in the guinea pig period when myself and Paul Rice were picking Offaly early on, and we weren't entirely sure of the rules in terms of how many switches we were going to make. Made 2, should have made 1 initially, but we corrected the Mount Rushmore before any chiselling took place, and Matt Connor went on there, and I think everyone was reasonably happy after that. I mean, listen to the conversation you guys have had in the last few moments. It is a balancing act. When we were going to select, we were trying to find sporting achievement had to be a heavy weighting on this, but also I think the love for the particular sport and the love for the sports person in that county has to be hugely important too. And I think that's why both Oisín and Jesse took a few pelters at the weekend, because people were like, how can you have a Mount Rushmore for Waterford and not have John Milan, when John Milan feels like the most loved sportsman in probably the most important sport within that county. And like, it is difficult when you're trying to balance international achievement versus particularly say how someone is loved. And naturally the GAA is probably, as a popular sport in a lot of counties, is probably going to be the number one. And as you said, Eoin, the association is very much there because these people go out in the county jersey, as opposed to people who might go abroad and play on the international stage and then have an attachment to the area that they're from. Like, you could make an argument with Aidan O'Brien to go into either Tipperary, given that that's where Coolmore have been working out of and where his success has been, or his home county of Wexford. So you get that kind of dilution sometimes. But look, I've watched the last couple. I've enjoyed the debates around them. I mean, I probably wouldn't have picked them exactly the same, given my own kind of preference towards hurling. But yeah, obviously very surprised not to see Henry Shefflin or Brian Cody on the Kilkenny Mount Rushmore, and very surprised not to see John Milan or maybe Ken McGrath, as much as Oisín tried to get Ken onto his Mount Rushmore, or maybe even Dan Shanahan. They were blessed for options in Waterford. I know they weren't All-Ireland winners, but I just think when it comes to that kind of popular feel, I would have definitely edged a little bit more in that direction.
Nathan, what was the year Jordan Spieth absolutely bottled it in the Masters? 2016, is it? When Danny Willett went on to win it?
Yes, there were a couple of them.
It feels like watching a lot of people in Mount Rushmore has been a bit like watching Jordan Spieth that weekend. Some people managed to drive the ball straight, some people have just gone well off the tee, but it's been a bit of theatre to watch, to say the least. Well, you're here with the sports season, there's plenty going on.
Yeah, there is, and we start with Gaelic games, and the Club Players Association have called for all 11 weeks of the upcoming club window to be used for its stated purpose. The CPA have hit out at some counties who are planning to run off their club championships in a quick blitz-style format. Club fixtures can resume on July 31st, and they have until October the 11th to complete it if they want to use 10 or 11 weeks of the season. The CPA also want to ensure that club players aren't coerced into training with inter-county sides before the club window is over. Now, officially, inter-county teams can go back training from the middle of September, but there are reports that maybe some county managers might try and get people back in for some sessions before then. The CPA chairman, Michal Briody, was speaking overnight. The full statement is available to read on otbsports.com. Meanwhile, Eddie Brennan, the Laois manager, has been speaking in the Irish Examiner on this issue as well, and he wants the GAA to make a level playing field for those inter-county teams who are returning back to training. He says that really no one should be allowed collectively back before the 13th or 14th of September, but his concern, and he used a very specific example, is that if Wexford run off their championship as planned by the end of August, but the county final in Laois isn't until the last week of September or the first week of October, and if Laois were to draw Wexford in the Leinster Championship, would there not be a massive disadvantage in terms of preparation if teams were to have a 3 or 4 week head start?
Yeah, this is a really interesting one, Will, isn't it? It's like this situation is a little bit out of the GAA's hands at the top level if all these county boards have such control over what they can do with their club season. And if you've got an inter-county manager or an inter-county setup that has a vice-like grip on the county board or is seen as the be-all and end-all within that county, then naturally the club player is going to get screwed over here at some point. It's very hard to see a way around this. There has been talk of a GEA master fixtures plan coming out soon, but I don't think we've seen that yet. It would be nice if that master fixtures plan actually permeated all the way down to club level. But then again, you find you will have all these complicated situations with bigger counties, with more dual players, and how tricky that would be as well. Like one of the lines from Brennan's piece in the Examiner today is, we had an opportunity to make this a novel year with no senior intercounty championship. And that really was the opportunity. This, and I think it possibly still is an opportunity for us to see how brilliant and how vibrant the club championships can be all around Ireland when the conditions are good, when they're streamed live online, and when we have a selection of all of these club games. And I think putting that in the shop window for a time and for a prolonged period of time this summer would have been sensational. And it's a shame now that we're chipping away at this. One of the things, though, is that you start to see that the national leagues could potentially be finished before the championship gets underway. Does that not buy inter-county managers a bit of time where it's like, keep the hands off the players for another 2 or 3 weeks at least, and you can use the league as kind of a fitness base for the players before you get into the real cut and thrust of the championship. I can sympathise with both sets of people involved in this, but kind of the thing that it comes down to is that this was such a really good opportunity for the club players this summer, and now that opportunity may not actually be seen out in a proper manner.
Yeah, look, I was covering the press conference with the GA for OTB Sports a couple of weeks ago, and something that was made very clear from John Horn, from Fergal McGill, pretty much across the Croke Park administration who were in on that teleconference call, was that they said, look, there's an 11-week window. It is now up to county boards to make their decision as to what they want to do with their championships. And we have seen a huge diversity. John Fogarty has an interesting piece in the Irish Examiner where he's got 10 or 11 questions about championships that have already been stated by county boards over the last 7 to 10 days. And the interesting thing is, so many of the championships look vastly different when you go from county to county. There's no kind of set example as to what teams want to do. And if you look at some counties are using the 10, 11 weeks entirely, and some are trying to play off their championships, like with Waterford football and with the Wexford championships, basically within a month. You'd have to feel for a club player there. I know some counties were considering too that if they put a group stage in, they could potentially play the group matches off in a week. So you play Sunday, Wednesday, Sunday. If a player picks up a slight tinge in the first Sunday, their entire season could be over. So there is that feeling, I think for a lot of us, when the 11 weeks were laid out and we knew there was going to be no provincial or All-Ireland Club Championship, that was an opportunity to use those 11 weeks. The majority of matches are going to be over by the middle of September anyway, so the vast majority of players are going to be back in. So this really falls on a kind of a balanced situation where the GA once upon a time felt like the players were loaned from the club to the inter-county setup, and they went away with the county and they played, and then they went back to their club. I think we're now heading hugely towards a situation whereby county players and club players will barely mix in a given season. That it's almost like you're an inter-county player first and foremost, and your club is what you do when your county team are knocked out. And the window for the club season appears to be getting smaller and smaller, and definitely a lot smaller than what it was intended to be. And I know Pádraig Fanning, the Waterford former hurling manager, was speaking to him on Twitter at the weekend, and he was saying that maybe we were all just a little bit naive a few weeks ago when we thought that the 11 weeks would be used for the purpose in question. But what I would say back to that is, if a county manager puts pressure back onto a county board to try and free up players earlier to have them back for the start of September, the county board has to be strong in their response and say, no, we're going to provide a local championship. This is going to get players fit and ready for you to have for early October, and you're going to go with our system as opposed to us changing for you.
Definitely, I think that's 100% the right way to go. But at the same time, you might also be involved in a county where winning Liam McCarthy or winning Sam Maguire is seen as your religious conquest every single year. That is the most important thing to the people of that county. And if the county board screws up the inter-counties team quest for that, then the county board would get berated by everybody. But at the same time, maybe that's being way too harsh on the public of all these counties. I think there would probably be an understanding that the club should come first. What about this? What if the 11 weeks? I think there was an opportunity here to perhaps grasp the nettle a little bit. If the GEA came out and said, we understand the pitfall that's going to come here from inter-county managers being greedy with their players. How about this? You can have them for one night a week. The county manager can have them for one night a week on whatever it is, a Monday or a Tuesday night. There will be no midweek games for the clubs, because that is unfair on the club player as well, expecting to go out twice a week and performing twice a week. go out and train with your inter-county team Monday or Tuesday. There is no incentive whatsoever for the inter-county manager to run the legs off them on the Monday or the Tuesday. It will be tactical. I don't even know what other stuff they would like to do with them, that they want them so early, considering they're going to be building up fitness throughout the club season. But if they even had them for 1 day a week and then they go back to the club to train once or twice before their game on the weekend, and instead of kind of ignoring the beast or allowing the beast to kind of overshadow the whole thing over the next couple of weeks, they actually entertain it a little bit and allow them 1 or 2 nights a week. I don't know, like, because there is no way of stopping this at this point. It seems it's got to the point where inter-county will always be the most important thing, and the opportunity seems to be sadly lost a little bit this year already, the way these quotes are going.
I don't think. Sorry, well, I was just going to say what you're talking about there, and here I agree. There are different scenarios that you come up with where inter-county players play and train 1 day a week with the county team. I think maybe you're underestimating the difference between club and county in terms of the level of fitness and the quality of training, and that county managers don't trust club managers to look after their players in the way that they feel they need them. So they want them all to themselves. And you're right when you say we were probably all a little bit idealistic at the start of this, thinking, well, the club player, the majority, the all were going to be given the priority here, and given having been locked up for 3 months, given an opportunity over the course of 9 or 10 weeks to get out, to socialise, to build up their fitness, to do all the things that the GAA is meant to be about. But that was idealistic. That straight away, within days, we heard of a situation like there is in Wexford. And that's on one end. I thought Michael Murphy made a good point on Thursday night of, like, maybe you just need to go with a half and half scenario. So give the county managers, sort of what Eddie Brennan is touching on as well, that date of around the 14th of September, have all the county finals done by then. So you get your 6-7 weeks to run off your championships, run them in a way that everybody gets 5 or 6 good, strong, competitive games. And then you'll have your league system after that. But the county players are gone and they get their 3-4 weeks to build up to the championship in that high quality elite environment that they feel they need as well. But at least and everybody's on the same hymn sheet, which is what Eddie Brennan's talking about, that is there not a way the GAA could come out in force and with force over the next few days and say, actually, we have made a decision and we're going to stick by this, whether it comes to insurance, whether it comes to expenses or anything else, that there will be severe repercussions if we hear of any inter-county get-togethers. And we're constantly hearing anecdotal evidence already of inter-county get-togethers over the last few weeks even, whether they're individual or whether together, but that all the managers have to come out publicly and say that they're going to adhere to this. It does seem the only way. Now, whether it counts for anything, I'm not sure, but geez, if you're a club player in Wexford right now, you've got to be incredibly frustrated when you see the amount of games some players in other counties are going to have.
Will, you might just run us through the rest of this morning's sports news.
Yeah, well, the PGA Championship in golf is set to be played behind closed doors, guys. The tournament wound up being the first major of the year as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Harding Park in San Francisco is set to host the tournament from the 6th of August. City officials have given the PGA Championship the go-ahead, but they're only consenting for it to happen without fans in attendance at the course. The PGA of America are due to confirm that measure later today. In racing, there are 2 Group 1s down for decision at Royal Ascot, which gets underway this afternoon. I know you'll be previewing it later. The Aidan O'Brien-trained Circus Maximus is due to go off as the favourite in the big one today. That is the Queen Anne Stakes. The US Tennis Association is due to confirm that this year's US Open will be going ahead as planned. The Grand Slam is due to get underway on August 31st. The tournament, a bit like the golf, will be played behind closed doors and with strict medical protocols in place for all players, and also very strict travelling restrictions where players won't be allowed into Manhattan during the tournament. Rafa Nadal, Novak Djokovic, Ashley Barty and Simona Halep are among the players who've expressed their doubts about playing at Flushing Meadows this year. The Cricket 2020 World Cup might not go ahead this year. Cricket Australia chairman Earl Eddings has been speaking this morning. Ireland are due to take part in the tournament in Australia in October, and last month the ICC had said they were very hopeful that the 16-team event would be played. But Eddings feels the challenge of getting 15 squads from abroad into Australia later this year is unrealistic, in his words. He's added the hosts are willing to move the event back to 2021. The Champions League final is set to be played on a Sunday for the very first time. Lisbon will host the final stages of the competition from the quarter-final stage onwards. The quarters and semis will be single-leg affairs beginning on August the 12th and finishing up on the 23rd. The Europa League, meanwhile, will follow the same format. The finals will be moved from Poland to Germany, and 4 German cities will host from the quarterfinals onwards. And the CEO of St. Pat's believes Gary Owens and Niall Quinn have failed badly in their FAI roles. Gareth Kelleher claimed last night that clubs have been misled by the interim CEO and the interim deputy CEO of the association. Kelleher believes that Owens and Quinn have lost the confidence of St. Pat's. Talks regarding a financial package to try and restart the SSE Electricity League season have so far produced very little. However, First Division clubs said last night that they're increasingly positive about the return to play in August, and they held talks with both Owens and Quinn yesterday afternoon.
All right, thanks for that, Will. Let's tell you what's coming up this morning on OTB AM. We've got the sports pages coming at 25 to 9, a bit later than usual this morning, because we've got Gary Rogers coming up in just a moment to talk about that story with the FAI, as Will mentioned. Conor Hourihane will be on the line at 9 o'clock to chat about the return of the Premier League. He's involved in the first game tomorrow night, which is Aston Villa against Sheffield United. Tom Malone will be previewing Royal Ascot then at around 20 past 9. And then at 9:40 this morning, we're rounding off our Premier League previews with our football best case, worst case scenarios for the Premier League. You getting those early season tingles, Nathan, that you would usually associate with August?
I don't know. I've kind of mixed emotions. Generally, when the season starts, I am from 2 months out looking at the fixtures and getting excited about the games we're going to be covering and what may happen, what might happen. But we're not allowed to travel to the games because we have to self-isolate for 2 weeks after every single match we go to, which wouldn't be ideal. So, yeah, it's going to be strange.
Yeah, well, it's tomorrow night. It is City against Arsenal. It's going to be your particular game live on Off the Ball. Right, delighted to say that Dundalk goalkeeper and PFAI chairman Gary Rogers is with us at 25 past 8 on this Tuesday morning. Gary, you're very welcome. How are you getting on?
Good, thanks very much for having me.
Not at all. So this week, it's fairly important to say the very least in terms of getting the League of Ireland back up and running. How big a challenge, first off, is this week going to be, or these discussions going to be, and these next few weeks going to be for you?
Well, it's a huge week. I think, the finances were disclosed last week. Well, it's hard to say how clear it has been because the clubs have been very vocal that, they still want more clarity on that financial package. It obviously isn't up to scratch in terms of what they were looking for to come back in and play football. So it is going to be a tricky week. Obviously, there's a meeting with UEFA tomorrow, which will outline to the European teams where when they're going to get up and running in terms of Europe. One thing for sure is we know that European football is going to go ahead, and it does seem to be as if it's going to be a one-leg scenario. So how they're going to do that now should be disclosed. Tomorrow is that meeting. But there's huge challenges in our own domestic game to get the whole league back up and running.
You mentioned clarity on the financial package that is required to get the League of Ireland back up and running. How much clarity have you got to this point, and how much more do you need to get?
Well, what they've come out with so far is a 1.7 million package, and 500 of that is government funded, which has been taken from the 800,000 which they had allocated to the men's and women's game. So that's money from the government that they've put into the pot. Also, solidarity money that they're looking to bring forward is 800,000, and then this 4-team tournament that they were planning on playing in July, and which has now been scrapped, there's 2.5 million that was allocated for that. So there's still a shortfall on the 1.7 million. So I don't think they're anywhere near where the clubs thought they would be. So this is obviously a huge hurdle. They have been looking obviously for the 4 teams in Europe to forgo some European money, which doesn't appear to be happening, and you can understand the reasonings for that. But there doesn't seem to be any new money from the FAI put into it. They did forgo the affiliation fees which clubs have to pay in order to enter the league, but that's not exactly money put into the pot. It's money that they've said, well, we're going to allow you not to pay that this year. So that's where the major stumbling hurdle is, and that's just down to finances. There'll obviously be other issues as well in terms of the format of the league and the amount of games they're looking to play. So what they have outlined at the minute is they're looking at coming back and playing 18 games league, which is 2 rounds, and 5 of them games have already been played. So depending on your situation, in the league table, it's hard to know how happy teams will be coming back to play 13 league games. So it's there's huge issues, not just financial ones.
Money, Gary. You must have mentioned it about 10 times there, and that's what all this comes down to. And a lot of what you're talking about does amount, it feels, to robbing Peter to pay Paul, that it's money that was due to be spread out over the next number of years that's going to be brought forward probably rightly so, considering the crisis we're in, to ensure that there is a league over the next number of years. But the new money angle that hasn't come through, that whether it was streaming or whether it was new broadcast deals or sponsorship deals or UEFA, FIFA money, how frustrating has that been from a player's point of view and from watching this over the last couple of months and watching the FAI come out with any amount of ideas, but it seems as though none of them have come to fruition so far?
Yeah, it's been hugely frustrating. I think the most frustrating thing is the time frame. Like we're talking 2 or 3 months now, and there doesn't seem to be any new developments, like you say, whether it be FIFA money or UEFA money or government money. We all know there's certainly no FAI money because of the scenario with the last kind of regime. I know there's kind of 2 debates whether it's old and new regimes here, but the drawing down early of 4.5 million from UEFA has left the organising body in a serious hole. Whereas that money now, if it hadn't been drawn down early, would be there as a contingency fund to get the league up and running. So I thought we're paying the price for the past regime's faults, really, and it's difficult for the likes of Niall and Gary who are coming in there, and they're trying to I suppose pick up the pieces and get the game back on the road, for want of a better word. So there's huge problems and huge frustrations for everyone on all sides of it.
Do you know what some of the new ideas were in terms of generating new money for the FAI?
Yeah, well, you're obviously looking at streaming. The big problem is with TV deals. There's no TV deal in this country. Well, it's not, the clubs are not benefited from it, and all the sponsorship deals previously were all rolled into a confidentiality agreement and rolled in with the senior international team. So clubs had no idea what money the league was generating, and so therefore they were unable to, clubs were unable to take over the league themselves and run it, because effectively you'd be taking over, and you wouldn't know what it has been worth. So it's a bit of a minefield, really. Obviously, the new idea is you're looking at generating a new TV deal, but the TV deal doesn't run out until the end of this year, so they haven't been able to go in and broker a new deal on that. Streaming is obviously another revenue that they've been looking at, and they haven't, I suppose, floated how much the revenue deal will be worth. It certainly would be worth something, but now you're at the stage where all of the European countries are back up and running. If we had been able to get up and running, you could have benefited from being first back, as opposed to we're the situation now where we're going to be last back. And at the minute, we currently don't have a start date, and we're the only summer league in Europe who doesn't have a start date back. And that's hugely frustrating for the players who are training away at the minute, trying to stay fit and stay focused for a league that they don't know when it's going to start.
Niall Quinn was saying a few weeks back that he didn't want to talk about other revenue streams being explored because he didn't want to compromise potential deals that were happening. He had mentioned the possibility of streaming, television revenues, things like that. How confident were you that these other revenue streams were close to happening? Because it seems at this juncture now, either those deals that he didn't want to compromise have now either fallen through or something just hasn't happened with them. Were you confident that there was going to be a solution found that didn't involve streaming or television revenues?
I suppose you're hopeful more than confident. It's hard to, be too confident when, that person or that company who are willing to come in are not willing to put their name to it. I think if you were coming in to save the league, you'd be willing to put your name to it because you're going to benefit from it. So, it was hard to be overly confident, but we're all hopeful, that there is going to be a resolution and we are going to have football, this year, and the sooner the better. Obviously, with European football, coming probably ahead of league action, at least we have that kind of to look forward to. But that's only for 4 clubs. There's 16 or 15 other clubs. You've got Shamrock Rovers B, other teams and groups of players who are hungry to get back playing and eager to get back on the pitch.
Why did they organise that 4-team tournament if they couldn't afford it?
I think it was a pilot tournament just to show that we could get football back up and running, and there's huge testing going on in that now as well, and I imagine that testing will probably be dropped now in order to, at the end of this week we'll have up on 1,000 tests done, and so far all them tests have been negative, so that's a huge positive, if you like. But I don't think the need for testing is as great as it was possibly when that tournament was floated, and it was ideal sort of preparation for teams who would be going into Europe, obviously with no league action, to have as preparation.
Those were a nice few months we had where there was a real air of positivity around the League of Ireland, and we had wonder goals being watched by tens of millions of people, and a real sense of a new era at boardroom level within the FAI and potentially on the pitch with Stephen Kenny coming in. These last few weeks have been a cold, hard dose of reality of where Irish football is. And I'm wondering, from a player's point of view and your involvement with the PFAI, as to how damaging this whole saga could be. Because one of the things that Niall Quinn and his grouping have spoken about a lot is trying to reinvent Irish football for young kids coming through, seeing the League of Ireland as a path, not losing so many players at 15, 16 to England, giving them a viable route and livelihood in this country within football. If you're a player or you're a parent looking at this and there's options in front of you, you're looking at this and thinking Irish football is still a complete basket case.
Yeah, unfortunately, you know, the signs are not good. I'd like to paint a positive picture on it, but it's difficult, you know. And you look at league clubs now have taken on, you know, the underage teams as well. And like we've all been talking about how we're going to get, you know, the Premier Division teams and the First Division teams up and running. But you've got all the underage teams and you've got the women's game as well. So like there's huge challenges in getting, you know, the elite football up and running. But you know, at the minute we're losing sight of, you know, everything else that comes with it. So it is difficult, and like I say, and that is down to past errors. Unfortunately, we can't get away from, you know, how the organisation was run and governed in the past. And now, when you need that contingency and you need a well-run organisation, you know, that you know has some money behind it, and now we don't have it when we really need it, and it's hugely frustrating. I think, you know, League of Ireland fans and players and people involved in the game would have known about the way the FAI has been run, and you know it obviously took a new turn there last year when Mark Tighe, who did great work along with plenty of people in the media, to uncover you know, the failings of our governing body.
As somebody at the top of the PFAI, have you been contacted by players who are concerned about their livelihoods? Because Stephen McGuinness has been on the show saying just how important the wage subsidy scheme is at the moment. There are hopes that it will be extended into September at this point. But beyond that, you really have to be hoping that revenues have to start coming into the league before the subsidy scheme goes out of the league. How big a concern has that been for you and for the players in the League of Ireland?
Yeah, like we have delegates meeting and we have a meet every week. So like all the players in each club feed into their delegate and we meet and bring our concerns to Stephen and Ollie and Simone. So like, there certainly is huge concerns. And I just said the COVID payment, you know, has probably alleviated a lot of concerns for not just League of Ireland footballers, but for the wider public. It's been, I suppose, the government deserve huge credit for implementing that, and it has helped, I suppose, everyone throughout the country, not just League of Ireland footballers. But like I say, when that does, I suppose, stop, and it will stop, it'll be interesting to see the fallout there, and I can imagine our office will be very busy.
Well, what would the fallout be in the worst case scenario?
Well, look, it's hard to see. Like, you know, if clubs are not back playing and paying wages and the COVID payment is gone, well, then we're going to have huge issues with players, you know, being unable to pay their bills, whether it be mortgages or rents, and like anyone else in any walk of life, you know, footballers have bills to pay, and you know, and people to look after. So it's going to be the same fallout for our industry as many other industries.
Is there a situation, like, I mean, are you thinking about the worst case scenario almost, where like other work needs to be looked at from a player's standpoint for a little while? Like if things get better in the League of Ireland, it may not happen immediately. It could be a situation where players have to get by for a few months without their actual wage from their football club for a while. Have you considered that and perhaps preparing players for what they might have to do in their personal life to ensure that, as you say, they can pay their mortgage?
Well, to be fair, 75% of our players are not getting paid their full wages as it is. So I think, you know, it's been a real eye-opener for players. We obviously have in place education and courses for lads, you know, to upskill and you know, to give them new skills for life outside of football. And, you know, that's been important, and it's been a message we've hammered home to our members, I suppose, over this pandemic. And it's been one that, you know, we've a player development manager, Emma Burns, and she has been brilliant with lads and available to meet lads in order to give them advice on, you know, their future pathway. Because one thing's for sure in our league is you're not going to earn enough money, you know, to prepare you for the rest of your life. So you're going to have to have a job for after football. And I think the realisation of that may have hit home for many players. And like I say, we do have education grants in place and for players, you know, to prepare themselves for life after football.
Even if the FAI do manage to get the funding together, and at the moment it looks like they might have about 1.3, 1.5 million. The issues and the difficulties don't stop there, because then you're into how you spread that money out between the various different clubs, almost all of whom have taken on a different stance throughout this crisis in terms of paying players. So Dundalk have been in a position where they've been able to continue paying their players. Yet Sligo Rovers, right from the very off, felt they weren't in a position to, and had to temporarily lay off their players. And in between, you've all manner of different ways. And I see Derry City coming out that they're not convinced that the proposed distribution is equitable, that they're one of only 3 clubs who've kept their staff and players on full salary. Do you see that being a potential sticking point if the money is there, if they do get this fund together, as to how they get all the clubs to come on board and agree to come back and to share the wealth?
Look, it's obviously going to be difficult. I think if they can get the money in place, how they divide it, if they have it there to divide it, I think everyone will be looking to get back to playing football, and whatever way that works out, it's going to be different. Some clubs are going to lose out, and you would be feel, I suppose, aggrieved if you're one of the teams who have been paying the wages, and then you're offered less money than other teams who haven't been paying the wages, and that's the difficulty that the FAI are going to have in brokering the deal between the clubs. Like, there's huge challenges, in divvying up whatever money they have in order to get football back. But we'll be hopeful that it can be done. I think if there's money there to be, they have to come back with more than what they have initially brought forward, and that's going to be interesting this week. And that you're hoping that a decision will be made by Friday, because this scenario of having 2 or 3 months where there's been plenty of talking going on, but at the minute we're no clearer or closer to a decision on when we return to football, and finances have been a massive part to play in that.
Have you been given any sense of what the best case scenario is, as to if funding is in place, if the clubs come to an agreement as to how it's distributed, as to when you might be back playing football again? What's the earliest start date?
Well, there is no date really. They were talking about the 18th of August, I think it was, and that was a couple of weeks ago. That's when the 4-team July tournament was in. And now that tournament is out, you would like to think they could bring that, forward and start in late July. But, it's you'll run into difficulty then in the time that teams would have to prepare themselves for, a start of season again with friendly matches and stuff like that. Like, lads have been training on their own and remotely doing Zoom sessions and conditioning sessions, but to actually get back on the pitch and play some games, it's going to take a little bit of time. And then you also have the problem is when lads return back to training, clubs having to pay the wages, they're not going to want to pay for 6 weeks when they can try and pay for 4 weeks. When they're back paying wages, they want to be playing football. So that's another issue that you're going to have.
The news this morning, and the main story here, just looking at the Irish Independent, is the St. Pat's owner, Gareth Kelleher, who came out last night and said that Gary Owens and Alcuin have failed badly in their work over the last few months. What's your view been of how Gary Owens and Alcuin have handled this?
I think it's probably not really helpful to throw that in there and throw it at them, because I think they've been thrown into a very difficult situation. I would obviously like their actions to be quicker, and not to have the sort of time delay that we have in terms of getting the league. They could have, this financial package that has been unveiled this week probably could have been unveiled a month ago, because there's effectively not a whole lot in it that clubs weren't expecting already. So I think we could have done this earlier in the process, and now we find ourselves probably we've lost more time and we're further down the road with no real, I suppose, benefit from it. So it is difficult for them. It's not an easy situation, but the circumstances that they've been thrown into, as we all know, has been hugely difficult, and it's an uphill task for them. But I do feel that they certainly, their heart is in the right place, and they are trying to move things forward. But we'll see. The proof will be in the pudding when we eventually, hopefully, get this over the line and we see football back up and running. I don't think we can judge them halfway through the negotiation period. I think that statement coming out in the middle of a very important, I suppose, time frame in terms of getting the league up and running, is probably not as helpful as it could be.
How do the top 4 clubs, how do they feel, in your opinion, about the idea that they were asked to stump up prize cash, essentially, or the European qualification cash to try and float everybody else? Like, it's interesting that you see the St. Pat's chief coming out and kind of, if you wanted to look at it one way, with the request for the top 4 clubs to stump up a bit of cash, there could have been a bit of friction created there if things weren't on great terms.
I don't think clubs are going to be too happy about it, to be honest with you, because you look at our what our league generates in terms of prize money, and I seen something today where the Scottish Championship team, the bottom team of the Scottish Championship team, earns 175,000 in prize money, and the top team in the Premier Division here will earn 100,000 in prize money. So, it's not as if you're talking about vast amount of money that our clubs generate. And the one carrot that they have is if they qualify for Europe, they have a capacity to generate more income, because they haven't been getting it. And clubs, it changes regularly in our league, as we know. It's very cyclical in terms of who the top teams are and the bottom teams are. It changes very quickly. So, to ask a team that's earned the right to play in Europe and to generate more revenue, to take it off them, like say Bows, who haven't been in Europe for 4 or 5 or 5 or 6 years maybe, and now all of a sudden they're in Europe this year and they've been asked to give 100,000 back to support other clubs. It's a very tough ask, I think. And to be honest with you, I don't think it's a good idea to be looking for clubs to bail out the FAI.
Yeah, everybody's in this together, but there is a line, isn't there, at a point? I'm sure people in Dundalk weren't happy with the request either.
Yeah, I don't think any of it hasn't been agreed, so it's fairly obvious that none of the clubs were happy with it,
Yeah, well, it's going to be a very, very interesting few days. Gary, thanks a million for your time this morning. Really appreciate it.
No problem at all, lads.
Gary Rogers, Dundalk goalkeeper and chairman of the PFAI there on the line. Right, just to tell you, this Friday at 12 noon, we'll be giving you another chance to win €1,000 in our new game show, Know Your Football. The prize fund has been reset because we had our first winner in last week's game who walked away with a handy £2,000. He or she answered all 15 questions correctly. Not sure who the winner was, actually. You can register at the following link, quiz.otbsports.com. That's quiz.otbsports.com. Then simply log in just before 12 p.m. on Friday to play along. Know Your Football is brought to you in association with Paddy Power. Check out paddypower.com for the great offers, and always gamble responsibly. And remember, if you don't end up winning, you can end up testing yourself against the likes of Nathan or Phil Egan to see if you're actually smarter than them and know a bit more about football than they do. Right, last night on Off the Ball, Mick Foley of the Sunday Times and Trinity College professor Brian Hanley, they joined Joe to chat about John Mitchel, a man who has a number of GAA clubs named after him in this country. So is this something that should be reconsidered, they were asked?
In a lot of ways, I suppose, the naming of GAA clubs has reflected in some ways different eras and different things that were in vogue, if you like, at particular. So, as Brian has outlined there really well, John Mitchel was a hero, really, to a lot of Irish Republicans at a particular period of Irish history in the early 20th century, and would have represented something different from what we know of him in the totality, if you like, around his views on slavery and so on. And those views on slavery, I would imagine, wouldn't have gotten an awful lot of traction in Ireland at the time or attention. They would have looked at John Mitchel in a different way to how we would now when we discuss him. So in the same way, views evolve, history evolves, our education around things evolves, the way we see things evolves, and in the same way, GAA clubs and the GAA itself are right to look at how their names and how their symbols and how their flags and how their songs impact on the wider world around them. So from that point of view, I think it's a good. I mean, it sounds like something. I'd imagine there will be members of those clubs who will look and say, "This is an unnecessary imposition on us. This is tainting us in a way that we never even imagined we would be seen." And I don't think it should be seen that way. I think by the club members in question and by the wider GAA community as a whole, it should be seen as just a continuing evolution. I mean, our communities and our societies all around us are in constant change. And the kind of questions and the kind of issues that we face now compared to 100 years ago or 50 or 40 or 30 years ago, some of them mightn't fundamentally change, but the nuance and the volume of some of them will go up and go down. So therefore, they require a particular kind of reflection and a particular kind of thought process at a given state of time. So with all that in mind, of course, absolutely, the naming or the use, I should say, and the commemoration of John Mitchel in this way should be looked at. And I suppose it's even more so than statues in a way, because his name is being invoked, and I think there is a power invoking someone's name like that over and down through the decades, even if you don't know anything about them. It gives that name and that story a different life. So I think it is something that needs to be looked at.
OTB AM.
Yeah, fascinating stuff there. Time for the sports pages and otbsports.com. That is one of the stories on their homepage this morning. It's been one of the more interesting facets of the entire racism conversation we've been having over the last couple of weeks about John Mitchel, and many people, including myself, weren't fully aware of the history of John Mitchel up until about 7 days ago, to be totally honest. And that full podcast is worth taking out right now. It's on the OTB Sports app. It is on the website here, as you can see the homepage right in front of you right now. The main story, however, is with regards to the CPA. It's calling for sanctions if club window is not preserved. You've also got Denver Broncos. Drew Lock is worthy of NFL hype. That's Cian Fahey, and his analysis piece is always worth checking out. And Champions League Final 8 series set for Lisbon.
Let's start the newspapers by looking at the back of the Irish Independent. Pat's chief hits out at failed FAI. Quinnan, Owens and crosshairs as Kelleher calls on League of Ireland stalwarts to step into the breach. We just touched on this there with Gary Rogers. This is Gareth Kelleher, the CEO of St Patrick's Athletic, heavily critical of Niall Quinn and Gary Owens and the lack of plans, as he sees it, for restarting the new League of Ireland season, and looking to some of the other FAI board members to step in and take control of the situation. The FAI released a statement last night backing the people in power there. The CPA want GAA to hold coercion, is following on from that story that we had with Will earlier as well. The CPA obviously very unhappy with what's going on in a lot of counties ahead of the restart of the season. And finally, Cian Tracy has a story. IRFU concerned rugby on collision course with GAA. So there was a big meeting of World Rugby yesterday. They were coming up with a potential new calendar, which is not without its difficulties either. Possibly an 8-week international period through October and November, though there are plans to have Champions Cup games in there as well. So they'll need to come to some sort of an agreement. But it does seem as though, whereas ordinarily rugby would be coming to a halt in this part of the world when the GAA Championship starts, that we may have that feast of sport, as some may describe it, with everything happening at the same time between now and Christmas, and there could be a lot of collisions between the international games and big GAA games towards the end of the year.
The Irish Examiner this morning leads with Eddie Brennan's comments, as mentioned by Will O'Callaghan a little bit earlier on this morning. Can we handle the truth, is the headline there. I would never see it as my place to interfere or manipulate the local club structure. That is the big line from Eddie Brennan, which sums up his opinion on the whole thing. Autumn finish looms for Six Nations. Meanwhile, FAI look to get league restart plan back on track as club talks rescheduled. And Arteta positive Arsenal will find an Aubameyang solution. Mikel Arteta was out in front of the media yesterday, and naturally there's only one person he was asked about.
Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, also the lead story on the back of the Times. Aubameyang future hinges on Europe again, this returning to the press conference with Mikel Arteta, where he did put a little bit of pressure on the club's hierarchy as well, saying they, well, in that manager speak, need to match Aubameyang's ambitions. Arteta seeming to suggest that if they qualify for the Champions League, well, there won't really be any question marks over Aubameyang's, but that obviously in the position they're in looks to be a huge ask.
The Irish Times this morning leads with Sean Moran's story that shortened club championships would be sacrilege, says CPA. There is the back page there. There's also Natalia Coyle back in training there. You can just about make out her wearing her fencing equipment and also a mask for COVID protection as well. So interesting get up there as elite athletes get back to training in Ireland. World Rugby, meanwhile, set to confirm 2020 test calendar in coming weeks, writes Jerry Thornley. A decision will include when 4 postponed Six Nations matches will go ahead. So it's looking like the Italy game that was postponed when we started to realise the severity of the whole thing, that could be played on October 3rd or 24th, and then the last round could be rescheduled for October 31st. Then you've got things like the Heineken Champions Cup and the European Challenge Cup potentially being run off in September and October. The quarterfinals could take place on the weekend of September 18th, 19th and 20th, with the semi-finals the following weekend, and then the Heineken Cup final on October 17th. So it would be Heineken Cup right into Six Nations were that to go ahead. Again, these are not confirmed dates at all. These are just guidelines and things that World Rugby will potentially consider. He's also writing this morning, Jerry Thornley, that Irish players are entitled to rail against their 20% pay cut and executive jobs under threat in new plans, writes John Fallon. There is a lot going on in the FAI this week.
At the back of the Mirror, United we stand. Villa and Blades will join together to salute Black Lives Movement. This is ahead of the game tomorrow night between Aston Villa and Sheffield United. And also there, Cole, Bully Souness must give Pogba a break. Andy Cole quoted in a lot of newspapers, unhappy with the consistent criticism from Graham Souness towards Paul Pogba. And also Arteta, we are going to make sure Auba stays. Once again, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, the story there.
The back page of the Irish Daily Star is Epic Fail, with the letters FAI in green. They are Gareth Kelleher's comments slamming Owens and Quinn, as we've already been mentioning. It'll be 6x2 is their headline then on the Six Nations story and the potential rescheduling. And there's also a story here from Jeremy Cross. We want a cool €100 million, cool being Koul, because Manchester United have been warned they will have to pay £100 million to land Kalidou Koulibaly. Yes or no, Nathan, worth it?
These figures for Manchester United are insane over the last few days. We had 84 million for Jack Grealish, 100 million for Koulibaly. Are they living in an alternative reality where the last 3 months hasn't happened and they're going to maintain all their fees? Maybe all these clubs are sitting in slyly on the conference calls that happened with the Glazers, and they're realising all these little commercial deals that Manchester United take so much pride in and how many Twitter followers they have, and think, this is a club on the rise. We're going to take them for every penny we've got. That's been a story for a few weeks. It's not the most exciting one at this stage. No. Napoli are going to hold out for 100 million for Koulibaly. They need to be keeping a lot of clean sheets next season if you've spent, 180 million between Harry Maguire and Koulibaly. For your centre half partnership. The Mail, the backstory again is around the CPA there, Neem Griffin, who we've obviously had on the show quite a number of times recently, saying take control, the GAA must be firm on club fixtures, saying you can't have 32 different republics all going their own way, that really the players need the GAA and Croke Park to come in and hit pause on this and take some sort of control. And Natalia Coyle is also the photograph there on the back of the Mail, and that story again of Kelleher's blast at FAI leadership.
The back page of the Irish Sun this morning is Theatre of Screens. This is Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who's installed a massive television at Carrington to ensure that he can do tactical instructions outside. Yeah. So that's it. It's not for his own personal enjoyment.
I thought it was that during lockdown he had started watching Ozark and then he had to go back to work and couldn't watch as many episodes in a row as possible, and just wanted to get this. Imagine the disrespect you could show the players. Just start watching something else on the giant screen. That'd be a very 70s coaching style of, this is the motivation. You're not even worth watching.
Matt Doherty has also been speaking to Owen Cowser as well. Surprise players can fill the void. He's saying that will be interesting to see if there is a psychological difference on players who perhaps were, I don't want to say spooked, but perhaps didn't perform as well with a load of people watching them as they did, say, in training. Owen Cowser and Neil O'Riordan then writing that FAI plan in limbo. That's the postponement of meetings. A Kell to pay now. St. Pat's owner Gareth Kelleher has written to the FAI board expressing his deep concern with their top brass, and they've also got that Aubameyang story. That is the Irish Sun.
The back of the Guardian, it's not over yet. Rashford vows to fight on after PM rejects plea over meal vouchers. This getting huge coverage all across the UK and online, where it seems Marcus Rashford has been in a battle over the last 24 hours with any amount of Tory politicians to try and continue the free meal scheme for vulnerable children. The British government and Boris Johnson tweeted out yesterday that the scheme would be coming to an end. But it does seem as though that Marcus Rashford isn't going to give up on this. And listen, he's done quite incredible work. It's a bit mad that a 22, 23-year-old has to be the one leading a fight for meal vouchers for vulnerable kids. But unfortunately, that is British society today.
Irish News is next. We'll have a look at that back page. This morning we don't have an Irish News. I'm sure there was some good stuff about the return to sport on the back of the Irish News this morning.
Well, I think one of the stories in the Irish News was about the rules in the GAA, the playing rules that obviously we just sort of dipped our toes into at the start of the season. They're going to remain in place for the rest of the year for the club championship. So get your head around that when you go back to training, to non-contact training.
That is the thing, though. And like the year that was supposed to be so different as well, with a new championship structure and all that, it's kind of like we're frozen in time, and all those debates are now kind of in a cryotherapy chamber somewhere, and they're going to be brought back out from cold storage for the next little while.
Can we not have a Congress, a Zoom Congress? That's what the world needs right now.
I mean, the Zoom Congress would be very. I would pay a lot of money to kind of see how the demographic that attends Congress all operate in an online tech-savvy conference.
That'd be magical. Magical. Give me a hair, mate. Hello? Hello?
You've got the Telegraph to finish up?
I do. I'll take your word for it that I have the Telegraph to finish up with. Yeah, the Telegraph. Rashford again. Plea on free meals is kicked out. That's the story that Marcus Rashford, after that very well-written letter yesterday, the decision was by the British government to just ignore it. And also, Stars must decide as US Open giving go-ahead. This US Open tennis, it is going to take place as scheduled from the first 2 weeks of September. But the top players in the world are going to have to travel to America, obviously, for this. It's going to be staged behind closed doors, and a lot of them, it seems, aren't too keen to travel. So we'll have to see how many of them go.
Finally, then, let's have a look at the OTB Sports app this morning. There's the homepage. So when you open up the brand new OTB Sports app, it brings you to the feed, which is your own homepage. It's all personalised. All of the latest stories up there, as you can see. If you click on the radio tab, then you can listen into OTB AM right now. And you can also check out the OTB Sports Radio schedule. So at 1 o'clock today, we're bringing you inside Padraig Harrington's gaff. At 6 o'clock then, there is a Legends interview with Irish Olympian Ronnie Delaney. And then there's the video tab as well, as you can see there, with all of our latest clips. And then the OTB Podcast Network, where you can subscribe to your favourite podcasts. We release over 40 new episodes every week. Right, so the three biggest stories in town this morning. The FAI, which we've been covering with Gary Rogers. Eddie Brennan, which we've been covering a little bit with Will O'Callaghan. We'll get back to them before we wrap up. But the story we haven't really touched on this morning, Nathan, it's our third story of the morning, is Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. This is not just paper talk. This is a real situation that Arsenal find themselves in, but it also the likes of Barcelona and Real Madrid find themselves in if they want a big signing this year. It seems it's pretty clear cut for Arsenal that if they are going to sell him and they don't qualify for the Champions League, they're going to have to get rid of him this year so that they can get the cash.
Yeah, but how much money are you going to get for Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang? He turns 31 in a couple of weeks' time. He's out of contract in a year. They paid a huge amount of money. Was it up on 66, 67 million to bring Aubameyang to the club? He's delivered. He has delivered week in, week out. Every time you go and see them, he's brilliant. He's, without question, their one world-class player. His goal-scoring record is right up there since he joined the club. But how much can you realistically expect in this current market to get from him? Are you going to get 40, 50 million? Are you going to get anywhere near enough money to be able to go and sign somebody to replace him? Like, what happens with Arsenal if we're still going back to a couple of weeks ago where they're talking about being severely restricted in the transfer market in terms of loan signings and free transfers? Like, who are they looking at? You don't see Arsenal linked with anybody. You're not, when there's talk of Timo Werner and Kai Havertz and players like this coming from Germany, Arsenal never seem to be in the mix anymore. And maybe it is consistently being out of the Champions League that they're not that sort of a draw. But if Aubameyang goes, who steps in? Who's the replacement? Who's going to score the goals? Because Lacazette, while being a good player, is nowhere near the quality. It goes against probably everything Arsenal believe as a club and as a business. And if he wants to go, maybe you have no choice but to let him go. But I wouldn't be selling him, even if you're getting 35, 40 million.
Because you probably have one more chance to get Champions League qualification with him in the team next year, and then the payoff of actually getting into the top four is worth whatever you lose by a lack of an Aubameyang transfer fee, especially because a banker of a goal scorer is such a hard thing to do at the moment. Like, you would almost rather be, if you had only one season at the moment, you'd almost rather have Aubameyang in your team than Timo Werner in your team, because he's a proven goal scorer in the Premier League. Like, even with Werner, there has to be question marks about whether or not he's going to do it in the Premier League. I'm sure many people think he will, and I personally think he will as well. But I think actually it's not just about the quality of the player, it's about the guarantee that he does it in the Premier League week in, week out, and that's why he's such a valuable asset. It's interesting what you mentioned there, though, about the fact that they haven't been in contention for some of the big signings around Europe. Not that they ever have been, but at least when they were consistently in the Champions League, there was the story with Suarez. There was always a link with a bigger name player. And I guess even the getting Aubameyang to come to the club, kind of, they wouldn't be able to persuade Aubameyang to do that now, given where Arsenal are. And I just wonder if you're being really negative about where that football club is at the moment. Are they kind of flirting with the idea of a little bit of a trapdoor at the moment? Whereas when Liverpool fell away from the Champions League places for a couple of seasons, you always felt that with the strength of the club and the hierarchy, they would get their way back in there. Chelsea obviously had the financial muscle, and they're like a yo-yo from between winning the Premier League to finishing 7th for a couple of seasons there. With Arsenal, you just wonder if that's the case, because even when they were title challengers, they weren't exactly massive spenders either.
No, and they're fighting, it feels, for one place in the Champions League at the moment, when you would expect that most seasons Liverpool, Manchester City and Chelsea will be taking up 3 of the positions, and especially what Chelsea are doing now. It's between Arsenal, Tottenham and Wolves and Leicester coming through for that final place. And right now you look at the squads that they have in front of them. Of those 4 teams, Arsenal's is by far and away the weakest. You take Aubameyang out and it's nowhere near. So that is the problem when you do start to miss out in the Champions League. Suddenly the better players start looking around at what's an attractive proposition. And the other issue is Arsenal had problems before this crisis. Like, they take in more money in matchday revenue than anybody else. It's still, even with Spurs' new stadium, it'll be interesting to see, do they surpass Arsenal in terms of matchday revenue? But Arsenal's matchday revenue intake was massive, up on 100 million a year. If that's gone for a full season, again, the financial hit from that is something that's going to really be difficult for the club to take. So if you're an Arsenal supporter right now, I think you're very, very concerned. You're relying on Mikel Arteta turning out to be the next Pep Guardiola, to have soaked up every little bit of knowledge from Guardiola, having to work with a far lesser group of players and somehow make them a greater thing, and develop the likes of Guendouzi and Torreira and Saka, while potentially losing the experience of a Mesut Ozil around the squad, but also just the brilliance of Aubameyang, who's the one guy in an Arsenal team that still at times are fluting around with the ball an awful lot and giving it away in silly areas. When he gets the ball, he has only one intention, which is to get it towards the opposition goal as quickly as he possibly can.
Do you see them making the Goodison Park title happen for Liverpool? By obviously, they need to beat Manchester City tomorrow night rather than draw.
They need to beat Manchester City, yeah. No, I've covered this fixture a lot over the last few years, and generally Manchester City are convincing and easy winners over Arsenal, and I wouldn't be surprised if tomorrow night was the same. Though, look at those first couple of weeks in Germany where there were a lot of away victories. Maybe that's the only thing that gives them hope. That fearful Etihad crowd not there in front of them. How many minutes into the game tomorrow night before there's a joke of I thought this game was behind closed doors?
Beforehand, I would assume. If you were on Twitter right now, schedule your tweet for 8:15 tomorrow night.
I should just get it in now in advance.
The Irish Examiner this morning was leading with Eddie Brennan, Can We Handle the Truth? Plenty of coverage around the CPA statement in other newspapers as well, and plenty on the League of Ireland as well. And we kind of followed that up this morning with Gary Rogers, Nathan. Just to get your take on that piece this morning, are you more or less worried about the League of Ireland after listening to Gary Rogers this morning than you were before it? Like, it does seem that there was a bit of a missed opportunity here in timing, if nothing else, in terms of getting this financial package across the line to restart the league.
Yeah, it does seem as though there's been a wasted month waiting for money that never existed and was probably never going to exist. And that's the big frustration there for clubs that are financially running a pretty tight ship at the best of times. I still think we should get some form of football. But as for the long-term prognosis, you would be concerned when that money, that 1.3 million, is money that's been brought forward that was meant to be spread out over the next 3 or 4 years. It is a crisis. You've got to respond. You've got to try and get things up and running. If the FAI can get that over the line, suddenly the pressure's back in the clubs, and then the clubs have to try and come together and come to some sort of an agreement. And but this has been an issue right from the start of how do you fairly split the money between clubs, that some of which are very well run, some of which aren't as well run, some of which are very much community clubs and don't have vast reserves, as to who gets, if everybody's getting between 100 and 150 grand, is that fair on the likes of Dundalk and Derry, who you could say are some of the better run clubs, and Dundalk maybe have deeper pockets than most. But should they be punished for that? Should they be punished for the success in recent years? Though it is in their interest to get the league back up and running. So maybe they just need to suck it up. I think we should see some form of League of Ireland football. But as Gary says, like, coming back for a 13-team season, is that hugely attractive? Maybe you come back for that and then you start another season in November.
Yeah, and you do have to have sympathy with figures in the organisation as well, given the condition the league was in when they got it. This is not what they needed whatsoever. This pandemic came at the worst possible time for everybody involved. If you're just joining us, you missed that piece with Gary Rogers. You also missed the conversation we had with Will earlier on about the CPA, about these Eddie Brennan comments. It does seem that we are going to reach a situation where there might be a bit of a disagreement, to say the very least, in a number of counties here, Nathan. This almost seems like a little bit of a storm brewing at this point, doesn't it? It feels a little bit more significant or a little bit more worrisome than previous club versus county debates. It seemed that there was kind of an air that the inter-county scene could do nothing about the fact that the club scene had been left behind. Whereas now what we're going to have is a very deliberate effort from inter-county managers to take their players from within the club season and take them for training or whatever it may be, or inform the county board to compress a season. It just seems that there's going to be something a bit more controversial here when it comes to the disagreements within counties.
Yeah, because I think most people are feeling that a return to the GAA is about more than just the games now, that for this year it takes on a greater meaning and a greater need for Irish society, and not just the GAA, soccer, you name it. Running off a shorter championship to benefit the county team is just insanity in the current situation. It's like the League of Ireland. It's like the FAI coming out and saying, we're going to postpone all amateur football till the Premier League season finishes. Because, you know, it's a totally different thing. It's nothing to do with it. Nothing to do. The two aren't really connected, but, you know, you can sit and watch that for the next 6 weeks. Like, why can they not be playing competitive football and hurling in Wexford all the way through till the middle of September? There's no reason. It just needs somebody, and Liam Griffin's right, maybe it does need leadership from the top of Croke Park to come out and get everybody to buy into this. But maybe they're realistic in Croke Park and say that is never going to happen. Like, trying to bring the county, like, isn't this the problem that comes up all the time? That trying to bring the county boards together to some sort of an agreement, it's practically impossible. They all run their own ship. They all do what they want when they want. And yeah, it's just it feels like it's a real missed opportunity.
Yeah.
It does feel that for all the conversations and the naive conversations as they're looking now that were had over the last 2 or 3 months of a better, I don't say better GAA, because I think by and large the GAA have done very well overall in this, but a better structure for and a better calendar for fixtures, that it was a bit naive, that like all going well, and if we can get back to having crowds next May, that the championship will be the exact same next year as it was this year. Yeah,
you just hope at this point that a missed opportunity is all it is, rather than being something that drives an even greater wedge between club and county. I just think that it's going to be put in very stark terms over the next couple of months for sure. But those are the sports pages, those are some of the main stories on the sports agenda this morning. It is 11 minutes past 9 on this Tuesday morning. You're watching OTB AM, the sports breakfast show from Off the Ball, and we've got plenty coming up in the next 50 minutes or so. So Tom Malone is going to be previewing day one of Royal Ascot shortly. We're finishing off our Premier League return to play preview with West Ham and Wolves, and Aston Villa star Conor Hourihane joins us. That is up next.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
And Liverpool lead. The Premier League is back, and Off the Ball is the only place you can hear live commentary of Liverpool's march to the title, the battle for the Champions League places, and the fight for survival. Every big game exclusively live between now and the end of the season, starting this Wednesday from 7 p.m. with Manchester City against Arsenal. And we'll also have live score updates on the OTB Sports app. OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Missing this? I remember Ollie texted me Solskjaer. One or two people would get hold of my number, unfortunately, and he would text me.
Then get this, the all-new OTB Sports app. Off the Ball, Ireland's premier sports channel, now has a new home, featuring the biggest names in Irish and world sports. Podcasts, interviews, news, commentary, analysis, plus almost 20 years of sporting archives. All free and ready when you are, at home or on the go. The new OTB Sports app. Download it now from the App Store and Google Play.
OTB AM.
Okay, delighted to say that Aston Villa and Republic of Ireland midfielder Conor Hourihane is with us now ahead of the return of the Premier League on Wednesday night. Conor, how are you getting on?
Yeah, not too bad at all, thanks.
Does this feel like a new season?
Yeah, it does a little bit, I suppose. You know, we've had a little bit of a mini pre-season. I know shorter than usual this time round, but yeah, it feels like last season, or you know, 3/4 of the season, or whatever it has been, is a long time ago. So it does feel like kind of a new season, new starts, and as we probably go into, hopefully that works in our favour.
You're just home from training at the moment, and you were saying how you can't even get changed at the changing ground. 2 days away from the start of the new restart of the season as it is. How different is a training session now compared to if it was the start of a season, say, last August?
Yeah, obviously, listen, there's a lots of different rules now. You know, like you touched on, you can't have a shower at training ground, can't go to the canteen. Only 3 or 4 lads allowed in the gym at once, same at the physio room. You know, we're not going into the changing rooms, we're going into our kind of indoor area because, you know, it's a big kind of indoor pitch, so you can stay 2 meters apart in where you change and so on and so forth. So, listen, you arrive to the training ground in training kit, you wouldn't do that usually, and you pretty much get in your car not long after, you know, unless you need a little bit of treatment or, you know, we do get food and you can have it there if you want, but it's brought down to you and you head off again. So it is very, very different. Used to it now. Listen, we're back at it 3 weeks, you know, nearly close to a month probably. And it's becoming the norm now. But I think deep down all the lads are looking forward to getting back to the real normal, whenever that may be.
How difficult has it been to change those socially distanced training sessions into fully fledged matches? I know you played a good few friendlies.
Yeah, so I suppose at the start of kind of getting back into that full contact, a lot of people were a little bit tentative, a little bit standoffish, which is natural. You know, we can't forget that, you know, there's a virus and a pandemic out there. But as the weeks have gone on, that the lads have felt a lot more comfortable with that and kind of getting back into that little bit of normality, like we've been saying. The test results have obviously been a big positive for that normality as well. You know, we've had no positive result at Villa over the course we've been tested. So all of that kind of plays into the mind and into the kind of maybe that relaxed little bit of, you know, mindset you can have heading into training, that all is kind of okay in this building.
How have you found the last 3 months? Have you been stuck around Birmingham the entire time? Did you get back to Ireland at all, or how have you found it?
No, yeah, listen, it's been mixed for myself, I suppose. I've had on my partner's side, we've had unfortunately a couple of people pass away from coronavirus. So that.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, listen, I appreciate that. No, it's so the first few months were amazing, family-wise, spending a lot of time with my partner and my daughter that I didn't usually get to spend. And then we had a couple of, you know, bad, maybe month, 6 weeks with you know, the virus. But trying to get on with it as best we can. And yeah, like I said, heading back into that little bit of normality is nice now, and hopefully, you know, we may have seen the worst of it.
Because the idea is thrown out there quite a lot that, you know, football is not life and death, and there were question marks at the start about why are we pushing this thing forward so quickly. You're in an incredible position now to actually really put that into perspective for yourself and what this whole virus really meant and the true implications and the dangers of it.
Yeah, I suppose only up until about a month ago, I suppose, you know, I don't want to touch on it too much, but obviously the virus kind of affected our family a little bit. So we were in our own little bubble thinking that all life was fine, and then it gets affected. You get affected by it. Someone kind of close to you, and all of a sudden you go, wow, it actually is out there. You know, this is real, and it is happening. But yeah, listen, we're trying to get on with it as best we can. You know, I'm back into training and the test results are big and key in kind of, you know, getting back into that normal life, as I say, and trying to crack on with it as best we can. And like I said, we really hope that the worst is behind us, really.
We've spoken to a couple of your international colleagues over the last few weeks, Matt Doherty, John Egan, both of whom said they were raring to go and get back into it. And it does seem as though most players' mindsets has changed over the last 3 months. From, remember Wayne Rooney writing the article of players are almost been used as guinea pigs at the start of this. Yeah. Has your mindset changed? Like, was there ever any period where you thought, actually, the last place in the world I want to be, while there's still so many unknowns, even as there are now, the last place I want to be is on a football pitch?
I suppose, no, listen, first and foremost, you know, I'm a football player and I really, really miss playing football. You know, first and foremost, I'm really looking forward to getting back into it and getting back into the games, and hopefully we'll get a few good results and that feel-good factor will come back to us, because you miss that feeling, you miss that match day feeling. But yeah, listen, I suppose a bit tentative at the start. And then, no, my missus is pregnant now as well at the minute, so that had a factor in the back of my head. So, and we had the unfortunate incident as well with our family. So there's been up and down periods. I thought 2 months ago, kind of, you know, when everyone was kind of at that peak stage, I thought, there's absolutely no chance we're going to get back into this. And as time has got on, listen, I think it's been handled as best as we can. And some players have their concerns. You know, footballers are human beings. They've got their own situations outside of football. Everyone does, you know. We've got a couple of lads with health issues, or they might be living with someone who's got health issues, and you know it's a matter of life or death here. So it's not easy, and I can understand everyone's concerns 100%. But listen, I think everyone know there's been no positive results in Aston Villa since we've started testing, like I've said, and we are really looking forward to it now that it's come so close. And you know, the only way that the season is going to get finished is by playing. So we are looking forward to getting going, really, now that it's coming so close.
It's brilliant, obviously, that there have been no positive tests, but by the sounds of it really has hit your club hard, because was it Dean Smith's father also sadly passed away from coronavirus? So there's a lot going on here. Like, congratulations with your wife being pregnant. There's a lot going on in your house over the last 3 months, good and bad. And the support network that you ordinarily would have to turn to probably isn't there. You can't get home. All right, you can probably have your Zoom calls the same as everybody else, but you also don't have that training room to embrace you. You don't have, I don't know, do you still have the sports psychologist that you're beck and call during this period?
I suppose you do, yeah. You can lean on your family, like you said, but there's nothing face to face. You know, I haven't seen my family now since, you know, I'd see them probably every 3-4 weeks. I haven't seen them probably since about February. So you're going back, 4 or 5 months. Listen, my partner, I suppose, who's pregnant, couldn't go see her side of the family when they had coronavirus and unfortunately passed away. So it is out there. It is real life. Like I said, I keep going back to hopefully we're past the worst of it. And lads really do. Yeah, we're footballers and people love the game and love watching us play football and whatever. But lads, like I said, like any other human being, they do have circumstances at home as well that will make them really, really worry. And it affects everyone, you know. So yeah, it is what it is, I suppose, and we need to crack on with it as best we can. But once the environment at the club is as safe as it possibly can be, and it is that the club have been fantastic in making sure everything's covered, then you know, everyone is raring to go, really, and looking forward to getting back into it.
I guess it helps in a certain way that Dean Smith realises just how grave the situation has been himself. Have you had conversations with him at all about that sort of thing over the last few months? Yeah, listen, you know, huge unfortunate news. His father obviously passed away, which was as desperately sad for him. So, you know, it has affected people at our football club, no doubt. Yeah, listen, there has been conversations, of course, because obviously I had to tell him about my own family situation. You know, I had to get a day off for one day for training to go to the funeral and whatever. So there is them real life conversations that get talked about as well away from football, and it's not easy for people. But listen, I suppose you try and get up and get on with it as best you can. And at the end of the day, we get to go in and train and to play. And you know, Dean and myself and all the lads are really looking forward to getting going now that we're so close to, you know, match day, of course, which is only 2 days away.
Are they all back in Bandon?
Yeah, they're all right. Yeah, they're as best as can be. Listen, yeah, mum and dad are great, and I've seen my brother a little bit more than everyone because he lives in London. So I've seen him a couple of times more than most. But no, they're all great, thankfully. Yeah.
The inclination here would be to kind of say how talking about relegation or talking about the Premier League kind of puts things into perspective or feels trivial. But I'd imagine from your perspective, getting out and playing has just been an amazing feeling. And like, you can tell today that you're incredibly excited about getting back on the football pitch. Sport has this unbelievable power to take your mind off it, to bring happiness to so many people at the same time. Yeah, and hopefully we can bring that to, you know, to many people around the country. I suppose, you know, whoever you follow at the moment, everyone will be looking forward to that first game on Wednesday. You know, there'll be so many people watching because they've missed football for so long. And then hopefully for the Villa fans, we bring good results to make them just as happy as the rest, you know. So yeah, obviously the ultimate aim is to stay up in the league and you know, stay in the Premier League for next year. And you know, hopefully we get off to a good start and, like I said, bring them smiles to the Villa fans, because you know, it hasn't been an easy time over the last 4 or 5 months for a lot of people. And you know, I suppose in the league position that we're in as well, it hasn't been too good of a season either for the Villa fans themselves. Is there any way to prepare for the behind closed doors aspect? Because it's potentially going to hit Villa harder than other clubs. Your home record this season has been
pretty good. The vast majority of your points have been picked up at home. Have you played friendlies there? Have you been able to talk about what it'll be like, how it'll be different?
Yeah, we've played 2 friendlies. We played West Brom and we played Leicester. And it is strange, I suppose, but it's going to become the norm as months go on. So we're going to try and adapt to it as best we can. You know, it's going to be really, really new for everyone. It's going to be strange for everyone. So I think it's going to be down to who can make the best out of a bad situation, really, and hopefully we can capitalise on that. And you know, it's going to be the same for everyone. So I think there'll be some strange results. I do think that, you know, some teams will start off and adapt to it really, really well, and other teams mightn't. And hopefully we'll be one of the teams that adapt to it really, really well and get off to a good start.
How have you found it this season in terms of the step up, as we call it? It was interesting chatting to Matt Doherty last week, where he's talking about the quality of training at Wolves, and when João Moutinho's pinging the ball to you on the right hand side, that it's not just about controlling the ball, it's about doing something better and creating an opportunity, and that pressure is always there. And Villa spent a lot of money during the summer. How have you found that? Is everything, particularly in that middle of midfield position, compared to the Championship, is everything a little bit quicker? What is the big difference?
Yeah, listen, there's some top players in this league. I think obviously it's my first year really playing in this league. Obviously when I was at Sunderland as a youth team player, they were in the Premier League, so I watched a lot of kind of games as a youth team player at the stadium alike, but it's so different playing in the game, of course. It's so much quicker. You don't get a lot of time on the ball, as in you don't get as many touches as you would in the Championship, because you don't dominate the ball as much. Teams are so fluid and technically really good, and pace, power. You know, a lot of the top teams have got the lot, really. They tick every single box. So it's been an amazing experience for myself to be involved in this league. It's been an up and down season, an inconsistent season for everyone at the football club, including myself. So hopefully, you know, this little period away now will stand us in good stead, and that second season syndrome might kind of work for us. But it's an amazing league to be a part of, and a league that we all want to be a part of again next year. So, you know, hopefully the ultimate goal is to stay up really and test ourselves again next year.
How much work has gone into some of those inconsistencies over, I think it's 99 days between your 2 games? I guess you can over-focus on certain things, especially with the defensive problems that the club has had at times this season. Do you get bogged down in it too much, or was it a good bit of time off and then the talk around tactics and how to arrest some of those inconsistencies then begins?
Yeah, so we've tried to cover as much as we can really over the course of being away from each other. There's been a lot of Zoom calls, team-wise, you know, unit-wise, midfielders, strikers, defenders, with the management staff, and kind of covering as much as you can to help us improve, trying to make the most of the time that we had away from the training ground. And we'll see on Wednesday if that's been if that work has paid off or not. But no, it's listen, there's like no bones about it. We're second bottom in the league. Whether we deserve to be there or not, the league table doesn't lie, and we need to keep more clean sheets, defensively be better. But that's from not just the goalkeeper and the defenders. That's from front to back. You know, working better as units, as a team. You look at Sheffield United, who are going to be playing on Wednesday, and they thrive on clean sheets. You know, their team morale is fantastic, good characters, and absolute hats off to them the way they've gone about their business. So I think that's something that we need to be better at defensively, especially to keep clean sheets.
I'm sure with the position Villa have found themselves in this season, you're not standing by in the middle of the pitch watching in awe of some of the players you're going up against. But if you were to pick 1 or 2 of the midfielders who you found yourself on a pitch with, who are the guys you'd look at and think, actually, these are a step above the norm, even in Premier League circumstances?
I think we've played Man City 3 times this year. Kevin De Bruyne is usually the one. So good technically, the way he passes the ball, the way he manoeuvres the ball, deceivingly really, really quick as well. He's been one that's stood out in my head. He played at Villa Park, he played at their place, and he played in the Carabao Cup final as well. And he came on in the Carabao Cup final, but the way he just glides past you is something to be seen really when you play against him. And then what do you mean by how
he passes the ball?
It just seems different to the rest of us. It really does. It's so crisp. The technique of how he passes the ball, his way to pass. He can drive it, he can whip it, he can outside of the boot, inside it. His crossing is phenomenal. You've probably seen it many, many times in the goals he sets up. He just seems to have so much time on the ball, never gives the ball away. Amazing, really. And you try not to be too in awe of these players because you're up against them every single week, but it's a pleasure to play against them at times. And I think we played Liverpool only once this year at home. It was a tough one for us to take, really. It was we got
scored twice in the last minute, pretty much.
Last minute, but Mane was really, really good that day. So sharp, so quick. His runs in behind are electric. So they're two that probably stand out in my head. Talking to you here, really.
Can I ask you then, what's it been like having a front row seat to seeing how amazingly well Jack Grealish has readapted from Championship up to Premier League again? Of course, he's a former Premier League player before the season anyway, but I think even people who rated Jack Grealish very highly are still impressed by how well he's looked this season, how he's been like a duck to water back in the league again.
Yeah, listen, I've done a lot of interviews over this kind of lockdown, and Jack always pops up, and I always get myself into trouble with how honestly I answer these questions about Jack. So I have to be careful what I say here. But listen, Jack is our best player. Technically, like I said, so good. He's taken the step up, like you said, to like a duck to water. And the world is oyster, really. He's so good at drifting past. He's drifting past people in this league, the best players in this league, with ease. I think he's the most fouled player in the league, so it just shows you that he's pinpointed, by every team. And listen, he's a Villa fan. All his family are Villa mad. So first and foremost, he'll want to keep us in the league, and we'll have to see after that really what he does. But the world is oyster, really, because he really is that good.
It's interesting how much influence he can. How much influence he can have on the game in the position he's played in for the last few months. I think at the start of the season he was playing more as part of a three-man midfield, a bit deeper. And as you say, you want to get your best, most creative player on the ball as often as possible. But another day we were over commentating on the Spurs game, and he's playing on the left of a front three. And it reminded me of what John Giles was saying recently about John Robertson at Nottingham Forest, that he rarely, if ever, saw a left winger able to control a game and run a game from out on the wing. Yeah, it seemed as though Jack Grealish was almost able to do that, from spending most of his time stuck in that left-hand touchline. The ball's still a magnet. Everything comes through him, and he can open up so much space. So I wanted to take him a little bit of time to come around to, you can still have as much influence on the game further forward, stuck more out in the wing than in the middle of midfield.
Yeah, I think it took a little bit of a convincing to get him to play up higher. He really, really had loads of joy in the Championship as an 8, but obviously, as we've spoke about, the Premier League to the Championship is a lot different. So I think maybe at the start of the season he wasn't getting the ball close enough to the goal in the final third to cause damage, and he probably wasn't getting as many goals as assists as he would like. So the gaffer probably reevaluated it and kind of wanted him to play as a kind of an inside forward, like a Mane and Salah type for us. And he played kind of inside left. I would, if you call him a left winger, he goes mad. He hates it. So he's like an inside forward left, and he gets in really dangerous positions for us. And he's had way more of a better influence, probably up higher, and he'd even admit that himself. And playing higher has made him score more goals and assists, getting the plaudits that he has. And the whole England thing is kind of around him now. So I think up higher, especially in this league, is suited him a lot better.
Another spot in midfield.
Exactly.
Just one last one on Grealish. As a former captain yourself for a couple of previous clubs, what is his captaincy style? What sort of a captain is he?
I would say he's a performance captain, leads by example on the pitch. He is vocal as well in around the dressing room and on match day, but he leads by example. How he takes the ball in all areas, how he drives at teams, how he sets up goals, scores goals, so scores crucial goals for us. So I wouldn't say he kind of he demands or he bosses people vocally. Not your kind of Roy Keane type who demands huge standards around them or anything like that. He's more of a on the field, look what I can do. The rest of the lads have to follow him in my kind of performances as well. And his performances this year have easily been our best, individual wise. And so that's a great quality to have, really, especially when we've been struggling for his performance to be that high still every single week is credit to him.
So this game on Wednesday night, ordinarily on a regular match week, would be huge for Aston Villa and Sheffield United, but probably get overshadowed by some other games. Right now, it's the most hyped, anticipated game of football there's been. As Eoin says, almost 100 days without football, and you're the first ones back, and 2 Cork men taking centre stage potentially, and yourself and John Egan.
I know. Yeah, it's great, yeah.
Have you an Ireland WhatsApp group that you're all back and forth, giving each other a little bit of abuse?
No, we don't. We only use we have a WhatsApp group, I suppose, when we're in camp, but off camp we don't really have one. But I'd speak to John regularly. He's a good friend of mine, and listen, he's been fantastic this year, getting load of plaudits that he and the team deserve. They've gone about their business so well. So yeah, looking forward to seeing John on Wednesday, and hopefully I get one over on him.
Well, it's going to be a good one. I think the world will be watching. There's a certain excitement about that as well, and a very jarring nature, I'd assume, being in an empty stadium while also knowing that the entire world is
watching. It's going to be strange. There'll be, not so much pressure in the stadium maybe, but you'll know in the back of your head every man and his dog is going to be watching. So I'm sure whether we win, lose or draw, the key is don't go on Twitter afterwards.
Yeah, and just don't be caught spitting.
Yeah.
Whatever you do.
Stay off social media for the night.
Listen, Conor, it's been great chatting to you. Really appreciate you making time for us today, and best of luck on Wednesday.
Cheers. Thanks, guys. Speak to you soon.
Yeah, Conor Hourihane in conversation with Nathan and myself there yesterday ahead of the return of the Premier League tomorrow. Today, though, is the first day of Royal Ascot. Tom Malone is here. How are you?
Hey, how's it going? Owen, are you well?
Looking very dapper, Tom.
Oh, come on. Look,
I have seen this.
It's Royal Ascot. You have to put in a little bit of an effort. There'll be no crowds at Royal Ascot today, so I was pretty sad about not even having the chance to think about trying to wrangle a press pass and try and turn it into some sort of work. So I thought I'd put some sort of effort in.
Have you been to Royal Ascot?
I've never been to Royal Ascot, no. I have been to Ascot though, and it's a phenomenal racetrack, even just the size and scope of it. But the Royal Meeting itself is just different level.
Well, there's no Queen there today for the first time in 68 years. So does it go back to Ascot today?
It's just I don't know. No, they still call it the Royal Meeting, even though there won't be any royals in attendance. So there won't be any of that, the big parade beforehand, and who gets to sit beside who in the front carriage and all that sort of stuff. So they're not going to have any of that. But they have changed it up completely. Obviously, racing season is completely different this year. We've had no racing for 8 or 9 weeks. Then it's come back behind closed doors for a couple of weeks in the UK. They've pushed things on very quickly in the UK, and that's kind of knocked on to Ascot. So you don't have the kind of normal preps for horses. We've a lot less form to go on. And the 2-year-old schedule's been kicked down the week as well. So instead of normally starting with the Coventry Stakes, which is one of the feature races, that's just down later in the card, just to give those juveniles literally an extra 4 or 5 days just to get a bit of a prep run into them.
Will we get into the race card today, Tom? Two big ones today. As you said, they've kind of reorganised the schedule a little bit. That day one would ordinarily be 3 Group 1s, and it would be a fairly heavy-hitting day, whereas that's a bit different on this occasion.
Yeah, for me, day one of Royal Ascot is right up there with, the Tuesday of Cheltenham. Right. It's just, you have the Queen Anne and then, the Coventry, and you've got, you normally have St James's Palace Stakes as well, and the King's Stand, which is the big sprint. So, look, we'll talk about the Queen Anne, which is the mile race, the second race in the card. Gets up underway at 10-2. Circus Maximus, your favourite there for Aidan O'Brien. Again, it's his first time out, which is a slight negative, but he has won twice at that kind of trip. If you look at just horse, there might have a bit of a squeak at a slight price. It's Fox Chairman, but again, these are. The first day of Royal Ascot today. It's not. If you're going in hard, you maybe know something that might not be written on the page, from a sort of betting point of view. I'd maybe side with Fox Chairman in that Queen Anne Stakes, but it wouldn't be a massive surprise to me if Circus Maximus were to win. Aidan O'Brien has had his horses pretty straight for the start of the season, which would normally be, sort of the middle of the season and they'd be flying. But, a little birdie told me about 3 weeks before racing came back that horses in Ballydoyle were working very, very hard. They were ready to go within 10 days when we were still sort of 20 days out from the season. So it's kind of no surprise that they were fit and raring to go. But look, Circus Maximus has a right chance. But just at the prices, I'd be with Fox Chairman.
I'm always interested in what the Daily Telegraph has to say about Royal Ascot. Marcus Armitage, in his piece today, says, this year's meeting, even without pomp and pageantry, is for the greater good of the sport and nation's well-being. So they're putting a lot of stock in this. Well, I went straight to their supplement today on Royal Ascot, and Terabellum is who their 2 tipsters are tipping for this one.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Terabellum in the Ribblesdale, is it? Sorry, Terabellum in the
Queen Anne Stakes.
In the Queen Anne. Yeah, look, Terabellum. the Godolphin horse is in really good run of form, and it's understandable. The thing is as well, Frankie Dettori on board for John Gosden. That's, there's nothing wrong with that. She's a filly by Sea the Stars, obviously a winner last time out at Deauville. I wouldn't put you off her, but I think she's probably slightly vulnerable against some of the colts. I see she's gone favourite. Paddy Power actually have her favourite against Circus Maximus. So plenty of people following Marcus in the Telegraph.
It seems that way. Certainly, I am. At 3:35, then it's the King's Stand Stakes. Tom, talk us through this one.
Yeah, look, Batash is the fastest horse in Britain. There is no doubt about that. However, this is his third run in the King's Stand, his third year in a row, and he's never won it. He is a freak of a horse. He's phenomenally fast. There's a slight question mark that he doesn't like Ascot, and that he's gone to the track 3 times and he's lost all 3. He was an absolute superstar. We actually saw him in the Stallion Trail, and we covered it in Off the Ball as well. He's now since retired, but he actually did the sprint double at Ascot last year. Batash finished second to him. That's some of the best form on offer. Would you really be telling someone to get stuck in at 10 to 11, 5 to 6 odds on for a horse that's never, won at the track? That's a negative for me. It's kind of a no-bet race. If I was going to pop one up at maybe a little bit of a price, I'd go with Equilateral, who's a 12-to-1 shot, who just looks a nice, hardy sprinter, well able for his racing, and he was gelded over the winter. He's always had lots and lots of speed, and I just think Equilateral maybe might run into a place. And like I said, if Batash doesn't fire, as he hasn't done in the last 2 races here, maybe Equilateral can pick up the pieces in what will undoubtedly be a very, very strongly run race.
Well, this is really interesting conversation around a horse potentially showing up. Like, I was looking at Jim Crowley talking about Batash, saying when Batash does win, it's explosive. He's put in some monster performances. If he's on his A game, nothing can beat him. I'm not sure, the sample size is way too small at the moment here, but are we noticing that horses are responding better to a lack of crowds? I think, Nathan, you were making the point last week that at Newmarket, the 2,000 guineas was the fastest 2,000 guineas in a long, long time. I know Oisin Murphy said that there was a tailwind and there were perhaps other responses there, but if you're talking about a horse and their likelihood of reaching their A game, but with a lack of thousands and thousands of people there, I wonder, is there a greater chance of that A game being reached?
Well, there's certainly fewer things that can go wrong. I mean, horses are flight animals. So, the likelihood of some drunken idiot roaring in their face at a crowded race course, and when you take that out, that can happen. I mean, you take that out and sort of, thousands and thousands of people roaring and screaming as these horses who are, trained to the nines and up on their toes, and so many things can go wrong just even to get a horse to the racetrack, let alone when they're at the track. So taking the crowd element out of it for the horses is probably for the better, you'd imagine.
Well, that is...
in terms of the track and horses for courses and the challenge that Ascot presents compared to, say, Newmarket or Epsom or the other big flat circuits, what is the challenge that Ascot brings that's different to those other tracks? What are you looking out for? The way they call Royal Ascot the Flat Cheltenham would be a really strong analogy. It's a really stiff track. So, if you see this 5 furlongs, and the question mark for me about Batash and the 5 furlongs is that it's a stiff 5 furlongs, and if anything, Batash would prefer somewhere like York, where he's won before, a flat, fast track. That is to his benefit. Whereas it's a stiff uphill finish at Ascot, that just puts a little bit more of a premium on stamina. So you see in the Queen Anne as well, you've got the likes of Circus Maximus, who you think would probably be more of a 10 furlong horse, really. But because here at Ascot, with the uphill finish, you just probably want a horse that definitely gets the trip and a little bit more, rather than one like Batash. That's what the question mark is about Batash. If this was at a different track against this lot, he'd be 2 to 5 or 1 to 3. So that the price you're getting about Batash at 10 to 11 or nearly even money is purely because of the track. It's not the opposition. And again, that's just a massive factor here. Like you said, the crowd coming out is actually a good thing for Batash, because in the past he's gotten quite hot at the start. He's messed up in the stalls. He's reared at the start. He's bolted. But that shouldn't affect sprinters too much. It's not like it's only 5 furlongs. They're only racing for less than a minute, so it's not such a big deal. But the track is a huge, huge feature, and generally over the course of the week, you'd always just be
keeping an eye on someone that's won at the track before, like Cheltenham, and also keeping an eye on stuff that just have won over slightly further than the race they're in.
Any more tips for the rest of the day, Tom?
Yeah, like going in the Ascot Stakes, a horse called Dubawi 50, who's around about 14-1, has won off a similar mark in the past by Dubawi. Will definitely handle the quick going as well. In the first, a horse called Kaiser Soze, who Ryan Moore rides, is between 12 and 16-1, depending on what each way terms you get for yourself. But he's just one of these horses you think there's a day in him, and hopefully today is the day. And like you want,
he doesn't have a limp,
when you
does
get
he?
him. Yeah. He's very difficult. Like I said, he's literally very difficult to catch, this Kaiser Soze guy. But he is actually an incredibly well-named horse, because he is frustrating and he's very difficult to get right. But he is just one of those kind of horses that he's going to turn up on one of these big field handicaps one day. And, hopefully today is the day. He's got a really nice draw as well. And the thing is with these like big field handicaps, you kind of need something at a price. It's a nice draw. If the field splits into two, Ryan Moore is an option on Kaiser Soze, because he's going to be produced late. So that's a positive as well. A horse of Aidan O'Brien's called Ennis Diamond, who's a really nice winner the last day. Runs in the Ribblesdale. Can't believe she's 10 or 12-1 in places. So that looks a really attractive price in the 225 as well. And we covered the King's Stand and the Edward VII. Oh yeah, one of my favourite horses in training. He's only 10-11, but Mogul runs in the Edward VII. Aidan O'Brien absolutely farms this race. And if you want to back one short price favourite today, Mogul or Batash, I think I'd probably side with Mogul over Batash. Just they're a similar price, but they'd be a couple. But again, it's with Royal Ascot this time around, the horses have only had 3-4 weeks of racing prep. It's a completely different proposition, and for me, I'll be looking at a few of those 16-1 shots for little each way bets, but I certainly won't be going crazy. I just need to have a look and see how things are panning out before we kick on for the rest of the week, because it runs till Saturday. They've actually added races into the card as well, so it's normally just a 6-race day, but they made it into a 7-race day to enhance it for us.
Well, sage advice as ever, Tom. Enjoy the racing today. Chat to you tomorrow.
Are you going to wear a hat at some stage?
I don't have a topper, Nathan. I rent a topper, so I know. I was actually considering getting one, so obviously not going to get one.
Hopefully we get you one for tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see a new series where you dress up appropriately for whatever sporting occasion we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm hopefully going to be covering a lot of cricket as well, because
So if we're talking Munster hurling in November, I want you to have like ham sandwich and a flask of tea beside you.
Big red tracksuit.
Yeah.
Tom, good stuff.
Thanks, lads.
All right, this Friday at 12 o'clock, we'll be giving you another chance to win €1,000 in our new game show, Know Your Football. The prize fund has been reset after we had our first winner in last week's game, who walked away with a handy €2,000 after answering all 15 questions correctly. You can register at the following link, which is quiz.otbsports.com. That's quiz.otbsports.com. You simply log in just before 12 o'clock on Friday afternoon and you play along. Know Your Football is brought to you in association with Paddy Power. Check out paddypower.com for their great offers, and always gamble responsibly. Right, so Kevin Moran joined Joe on Sundays Off the Ball for a feature interview about his life in sport. Have a look at this.
What's home to you now? Is it always Dublin, or is there a part of you? I mean, you've been in Manchester. Are we saying most of your life now?
Yeah, I have been in Manchester most of my life. Yeah. And Dublin will always be home. Dublin, of course. But I've got 4 kids, and they all live over here. They're all born over here. So in and around this area here, it has been home. But it's lovely to think that, it's a half an hour away is a flight to Dublin.
Where have the other Morans spread? Obviously, you're now Ray Moran's brother, as opposed to him being yours. He's
That's true. The role has been reversed. Very true, Joe.
So he pops up in the sports bulletins more than you these days when someone gets injured. So he's done fantastically well for himself. Are brothers and sisters mainly at home, or have they?
Yes, they're all in Dublin except for one brother who's in London.
Right.
Yeah, that's it. But everybody else is at home.
Okay, so do you get home much, Kevin?
I have until this coronavirus set in. but hopefully we'll soon be able to move that along as well. I try to get home as often as I can for family occasions, for business as well, and for holidays as well. You know, there's always a good round of golf to be had over there. So from that point of view, my brothers are quite keen on that. And unfortunately, we're due to go and see Ogie and Bomber down in Kerry for our annual Brothers Away Golf Day, but that was scheduled for the end of April, which has to be cancelled. So that has to be rescheduled.
That's a lovely thing that relationship is endured, isn't it? And that Dublin Kerry team seemed to get on like nobody's business. It's a very GAA thing. It's there's a touch of magic to it. The way he.
It wasn't when we played against them. Believe me.
Imagine, yeah.
It's very much developed afterwards. You know, there was no love lost on the pitch before or after, I think, as well. You know, even though you'd still, because they were such good guys, you'd say hello and all the rest of it. But it's very much developed afterwards as well. I think there's been a sense of recognition from both sides, you know, about the quality of what both teams brought to the game, and especially that Kerry team at that time, to me, was the best football team ever until the present Dublin team came along.
Kevin Moran there in conversation with Joe. The full piece we're digging out now on offtheball.com and as well as at youtube.com/offtheball. Best case, worst case scenarios, Nathan Murphy. We've been on a bit of an odyssey over the last week, going through every single club in the Premier League before things start back up tomorrow. We might get your final table predictions in just a moment, but there are two more clubs to go to first of all. West Ham and Wolves. We'll start with West Ham. They're on 27 points in 16th place. They're in big danger of going down. David Moyes at the helm. How is this going to finish in your view for them?
I would worry for West Ham. I thought initially when I started thinking about them and looking back in their season that they'd have enough quality, but then you start going through their squad and I'm wondering where it is. Okay, Issa Diop at the back is one of the better centre halves in the Premier League. Ogbonna's got a lot of international experience with Italy, and then as you move up you have the likes of Felipe Anderson, who I think is a really impressive player. Declan Rice, who very solid, keeps things ticking over in the middle midfield, and Snodgrass is the one who adds a little bit of spark up front. But I just wonder, as always with West Ham, who's going to score the goals on a consistent basis. And I just think they lack a bit of character in that team. And there's enough good teams around them who've struggled before the break that I think will rebound over the next little while, that West Ham might find themselves in difficulty. That's a big old stadium to be playing in front of with absolutely nobody there at the Olympic Stadium. I know people criticise the atmosphere at times, and they have a difficult fixture list. They start back with Wolves, Spurs and Chelsea in their first three games. You could be looking at taking 0 points from those, and then they have a lot of games against teams around them, against the likes of Norwich, Watford. They play Manchester United, penultimate game of the season, and then Aston Villa on the final day of the season. And you wouldn't at all be surprised if that was a winner takes all. What a game that could be. West Ham against Villa. I think it's been coming for a couple of years with West Ham. There's been a constant change of managers. They spent a fortune on players and on wages without ever really getting a team that fully connected. And yeah, I would have big concerns for West Ham over the final few weeks.
What's the best case scenario then?
Best case scenario is that they hit a decent run of form, that, as I say, they have players of the calibre of Felipe Anderson, who, if they were to go down, I think would be snapped up by another Premier League team instantly, that they find somebody who can score enough goals to keep them in the Premier League. Simple as that. That David Moyes uses all his experience and they just about survive. But looking at their fixture list, everything that's gone on previous to this, conceding a lot of goals all season, if I was a West Ham supporter, I'd be very worried right now.
Wolves are in 6th on 43 points. The best case scenario here is that they qualify for the Champions League, which might be enough to finish 5th. How likely is that to happen?
I hope it happens. I love this Wolves team. I love watching them. I mentioned last week I have a 7-year-old who's a big Wolves fan, so I find myself watching a lot of Wolves. But I think technically they're an outstanding team to watch. And in Nuno, they have one of the most impressive managers in the Premier League, both from a tactical point of view, considering he was a goalkeeper, to come out and be able to do what he does with all these brilliantly talented outfield players, but also just as a character and as a personality. There's no real nonsense with him. He's one of those post-match interviews you watch and think there's a hint of honesty, at least, to what he's saying. And they can win games in all manner of means. And against the better teams, they're always going to pick up and cause a lot of hassle because they're so good on the counter-attack. They've so much pace. We've Matt Doherty on the show last week talking about Adama Traore being not just the fastest player in the league, but probably the fastest player in world football. And I was reading an article on the Wolves website where he'd been working on his pace over the last few months to just try and get a little bit quicker. And the way they've changed things around, Nuno's never been afraid to make slight tactical adjustments, whether it's in midfield, whether it's moving Matt Doherty up or back, and now with Traore and Doherty together. They've been brilliant down the right-hand side. They're really fit. They score a lot of late goals. The one question is, if Jimenez isn't scoring, who else steps up? At times, Neto's got in there. They probably need a bit more from Diogo Jota between now and the end of the season. But any team that has a midfield of Neves and Moutinho, I'm going to get behind. And it'd be brilliant for Wolves. It'd be good for the league, I think, if Wolves could kick on from here. And they don't have the problem of the Europa League to worry about as well, and all the travelling. They're well used to playing game after game, 2 games a week at this stage. It's a good backup option to have come the end of the season. If they do end up finishing 6th or 7th, they know they're going to have this, as we heard today, quick fire Europa League finish. But yeah, I would love to see Wolves kick on from here as a counter-attacking team. And they have the brilliant thing about them is they can do it both ways. They have in the quality of Neves and Moutinho players who can control a game, but they're generally set up actually to let the opposition have the ball. And that's been a difficulty at times against lower teams who don't want to have the ball, that, you know, that they can play these raking 50, 60-yard balls. When you're watching them, everything looks so pre-planned, whether it's Willy Bolly, who I think is back from injury, Connor Cody playing these balls, diagonal balls, 40, 50 yards to Doherty on the right and Johnny on the left. Everything just clicks into place so quickly. So, yeah, they're a brilliant team to watch, and hopefully they can finish the job.
What's the worst case scenario then for them? Is it just it's very unlikely to see this falling apart at the seams, isn't it?
It is. They only scored 1 goal in their last 4 games. So that is an area they're going to need to work on. And it doesn't necessarily need to fall apart, but if they finish outside the Champions League places and they don't go and win the Europa League, they find themselves back in the Europa League, they find themselves back in that slog again next year. It was always going to be interesting last summer to see what Wolves did, because obviously it's a strange situation where George Mendes has such influence on the club and so much control over an awful lot of the players. Whether for the likes of Ruben Neves and Diogo Jota, it was going to be a 2-3 year stop before they move on and are sold for a huge fee to one of the bigger clubs. But it looks as though Wolves are going to try and keep these players and to kick on over the next couple of years and become a greater thing. And it would be a brilliant story if they could. Nuno, rarely spoken about in terms of those top jobs, in terms of a Tottenham or any of the top 5-6 teams. But I think if they continue the way they're going, he's got to be right in the mix. If, say, for example, Jose Mourinho didn't last at Tottenham.
Very quickly then, Nathan, who's going to be the top 5? Who's going to be the bottom 3 come the end of the season?
Well, Liverpool, Manchester City, Leicester, Chelsea, Wolves in 5th, Manchester United 6th, Tottenham 7th, Sheffield United 8th, Arsenal 9th.
Bottom 3 then?
Norwich, West Ham and Villa.
Norwich, West Ham, Villa. And we had Conor Hourihane on the show earlier on and everything like that.
I didn't want to say it.
You go ahead and relegate him straight away.
Villa or Brighton.
Villa or Brighton, right? Okay, I see. Well, it's back tomorrow night, Nathan. Are you you must be buzzing? I mean,
I am buzzing. It's great to be able to sit down and look at the weekend, and I'm looking at Saturday, and there's 4 games. I'm thinking, West Ham Wolves 5:30 Saturday evening. I'll sit down and watch that, and then there's another game after it. And then we're back Sunday. We've got Sheffield United, Newcastle. I'm not going to be stuck in an airport all Sunday night. I'll be back home in time for the second game. Then the Merseyside derby Sunday night. It's just going to be,
it's infectious, your enthusiasm for the Premier League, to say the least. Thanks a million for joining us on AM over the last 8 days or so, Nathan. We're going to have Will in the other seat for the next couple of days, and then Gerald will be back in next week as well. But that is it from OTB AM for us this morning. Thanks a million for joining us at home. Coming up on OTB tonight from 7 to 10, Brian O'Driscoll and Keith Wood are going to be picking their best Ireland 15 of the century so far. Brian is picking the backs, Keith is picking the forwards. The football show then from 9 o'clock. It's going to be focusing on the Premier League ahead of its return tomorrow night. Reminder that on Wednesday night we have live radio commentary of Manchester City against Arsenal, and if you've missed anything this morning you can catch it back through the OTB AM podcast. Just download the OTB Sports app and subscribe to OTB AM to get it every morning. We timestamp it for you so that you can skip through to whatever part of the show you want. So today we had Gary Rogers, chairman of the PFAI, talking about the current situation in the League of Ireland. Tom Malone was previewing Royal Ascot, the sports pages and the latest in the GAA with Will, and of course that interview with Conor Hourihane available right now. OTB AM is live weekday mornings from 7:30. You can also listen or watch the show live on the OTB Sports app, as well as all the usual places. See you tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The OTB Brief every